The repetition becomes truth. You hear something once and you think, interesting. You hear it twice and maybe you raise an eyebrow. But by the 10th time, maybe the 20th, something inside you begins to change. Not because the thing you heard is more true or more logical or even more believable, but simply because your brain, wired for pattern recognition, for survival, for the path of least resistance, has been softened by repetition. And in that softening, something dangerous happens. The brain begins to confuse frequency with fact, familiarity with truth, and before you even realize it, fiction becomes belief. This is not opinion. This is neuroscience. There's a cognitive phenomenon known as the illusory truth effect. Psychologists have studied it for decades. In one classic experiment from the 1970s, participants were asked to rate the truthfulness of a series of statements. Some were obviously true, some obviously false, but others were repeated, subtly, over time. And what researchers found was striking. Even the false statements, when repeated often enough, began to be rated as more believable, just because people had heard them before. Their brains weren't checking facts, they were checking familiarity. And that's the trap. Our brains evolved to conserve energy, to trust what seems familiar, to avoid the mental strain of analysis when a shortcut is available. This worked fine in the forests of early humanity. But in the jungles of modern information, it becomes a weapon. Advertisers know it, politicians know it, cult leaders know it. And yes, social media algorithms know it better than anyone. The platforms don't care what's true. They care what's repeated. They care what sticks. So the more something is shared, liked, and echoed, the more visible it becomes. The more visible it becomes, the more believable it feels. And the more believable it feels, the more it is repeated, until we're stuck in a loop of self-validating falsehoods, reinforced by our own brains. Think of how many myths have survived simply because they were told over and over again. That we only use 10% of our brains. That sugar causes hyperactivity in children. That vaccines cause autism. None of these are scientifically valid, but they've been repeated enough, with just enough confidence, to etch grooves into the public mind. And it's not just misinformation, it's identity. If a child is told from a young age, "You're not good at math," they start to believe it. Not because it's objectively true, but because it's familiar, it's repeated. If someone is constantly told they're too emotional, too slow, too lazy, too ugly, too weak, those words become internal code, a personal gospel. Their behavior begins to mold around that identity, not because it's accurate, but because the repetition gave it weight. Repetition doesn't just shape belief, it rewires the brain. Neuroscience shows that each time a neuron fires in a particular way, it strengthens that connection. Think of walking through a field. The first time, you trudge through tall grass, but keep walking the same path, and soon you've worn a trail. That's how synaptic pathways work. Each repetition wears the trail deeper. Each exposure makes the thought more automatic, more accessible, and eventually, more dominant. This is how propaganda works. This is how cults grow. This is how regimes maintain control, not by offering better arguments, but by controlling the frequency of the message. The Soviets called it agitprop. Nazi Germany used loudspeakers in the streets to constantly broadcast ideology. North Korea plays military hymns and party slogans on loop, because if you hear something long enough and often enough, your brain will stop fighting it. You will begin to align with it, not out of reason, but out of neurological fatigue. You don't have to believe something for it to shape you. You only have to hear it enough times. This is why mantras exist in religion, why affirmations are used in therapy, why slogans are chanted at rallies. Repetition, when used consciously, can uplift and heal. But when weaponized, it can bury you beneath someone else's idea of the truth. It's easy to imagine this only happens to other people, less educated, more gullible, not you. But that's another illusion. Because the illusory truth effect affects everyone, even experts, even skeptics, especially when the information comes in emotionally charged packages. Our brains are designed to favor ease and speed over accuracy. If a statement sounds familiar and doesn't trigger fear, we're more likely to accept it without inspection. And so, repetition becomes not just a tool of persuasion, but a silent architect of reality. Now, imagine this applied on a societal scale. Think of news cycles. Think of echo chambers. Think of slogans repeated across billboards, television screens, phone notifications. Think of conspiracy theories that started as jokes, but after circulating long enough, began attracting followers. Think of how flat earth theories made a comeback, how fringe ideologies gained traction, not because they grew in evidence, but because they grew in volume. In the digital age, truth is not what survives scrutiny, it's what survives silence. So what do? How do we protect ourselves from a brain that confuses volume with validity? We must pause, question, examine the source, trace the origin. When you hear something that sounds right, ask, why does it sound right? Because it's based on reason, or because you've simply heard it 10 times before. This isn't about paranoia, it's about awareness. The human brain is a pattern machine. It's a storyteller, a comfort seeker, and repetition feels safe. But the truth is not always comfortable. It is not always loud. And it is often buried beneath layers of louder, easier lies. You cannot unhear what you've heard, but you can learn to doubt it, to interrogate it, to hold it in your hand and ask, do I believe this because it's true or because it's familiar? Because repetition is not reality. It's just an echo. And if we don't become aware of the echoes shaping our thoughts, we may find ourselves living inside someone else's fiction, mistaking the repetition for reality and calling it truth. The discomfort avoidance loop. You wake up and feel a tiny knot in your stomach. It's not pain exactly. It's unease, like something is off, but not dangerous enough to confront. So, without even realizing it, you change the channel. You reach for your phone. You scroll. You swipe. You occupy your mind. And that knot? It doesn't go away. It just waits. This is how it begins. The discomfort avoidance loop. A cycle so subtle, so quiet, that most people live inside it for decades without naming it. But the consequences are enormous. We're taught to chase happiness, success, love, and peace. But rarely are we taught how to sit with pain, how to look it in the eyes and not blink. So, when discomfort shows up, when the conversation gets awkward, when the fear rises, when the work gets too hard, our reflex is not to process it, it's to escape. And here's the brutal irony. Every time you avoid discomfort, you make it stronger. Let's say you're afraid of confrontation. You don't want to offend anyone. You tell yourself you're being kind, but deep down, it's fear. So, you stay quiet when you should speak. You nod when you disagree. You smile when you're hurting. Over time, people begin to know a version of you that doesn't exist. And then, one day, you don't either. Not really, because you've built a self entirely out of detours. Or maybe you want to write or build something or change your life. But the moment you sit down, a strange tension arises. Your thoughts scatter. You doubt yourself. So you say, not today. And again, you escape. Not into danger, but into comfort. Into Netflix, snacks, social media, even cleaning your room. It all feels like motion. But it's not forward. It's circular. You're orbiting discomfort. And it's not just laziness or procrastination. It's deeper than that. It's your nervous system saying, this is unfamiliar. This feels unsafe. Let's go back to what we know. Your brain is trying to protect you, but in doing so, it traps you. Psychologists call this experiential avoidance. You don't avoid the thing itself. You avoid the experience of feeling uncomfortable, the sensation of anxiety, the sting of rejection, the weight of failure. And so, you build your life around dodging them. But here's the catch. The more you avoid those feelings, the less resilient you become. You stop expanding. You shrink. Your tolerance for difficulty plummets. And soon, even small discomforts feel overwhelming. Think of the person who never exercises because it's hard. Over time, walking up the stairs feels like a mountain. Think of someone who never says no. Eventually, they forget what they even want because they've trained their nervous system to flinch every time a boundary needs to be drawn. Now ask yourself, how much of your life has been rerouted by pain? When you scroll past certain news because it triggers you. When you ghost a message because replying would take emotional energy. When you change your dreams not because they were wrong, but because they were uncomfortable. This isn't judgment, this is truth. And if it stings, that's the point. Because that sting, that's discomfort. And for once, you're not running. Here's the other side, the path few take, but every fulfilled person walks. It's the decision to stay when discomfort rises. Not to fix it, not to numb it, but to feel it. to breathe into the awkward silence, to sit with the craving and not give in, to tell the truth and risk being disliked, to begin, even though you're terrified you'll fail. It feels like dying at first, because a part of you is dying, the part that believed comfort was the goal. But pain has a function. It's a teacher. And if you listen closely, it's telling you what matters. You're nervous before a speech? That means you care. You feel awkward on a date? That means you're emotionally present. You're afraid to launch your project? That means it means something. Discomfort is the compass, not the enemy. But here's what most people get wrong. Facing discomfort doesn't mean bulldozing through it. It doesn't mean suffering in silence. It means expanding your capacity to hold tension without escaping. It means learning to say, yes, this feels awful, and I'm still here. Like lifting weights, it burns at first, but you don't get stronger by avoiding the weight. You get stronger by feeling it fully and choosing to lift anyway. Now think of the loops you've been running, the moments you've told yourself, I'll do it later, when what you really meant was, I can't handle how this makes me feel right now. The opportunities you let pass, not because they weren't right, but because they were too emotionally charged. That loop of someday, it feeds itself. And maybe the worst part, it's comfortable. You'll decorate your loop. You'll make it pretty. You'll achieve within it. But it'll never feel real because you are not fully there. You've outsourced your courage to avoidance, but there's a way out. And it doesn't begin with a massive breakthrough. It begins with the smallest rebellion, staying. The next time you feel that urge to flee, to scroll, to lie, to abandon, to numb, pause. Take one breath. Just one. Let the discomfort speak. Ask what it's trying to protect, and then gently thank it, and stay anyway. Because the only way to build the life you dream of is to walk through what you're avoiding. Pain will not kill you, but avoidance will kill your spirit slowly, and one day you'll look back and realize that the biggest things you never did weren't blocked by the world. They were blocked by a knot in your stomach you refused to face. But not today. Today, you saw it. You named it. And maybe, just maybe, you'll walk straight into it. Not because it's easy, but because your life is worth more than the loop. The performance identity mask. You start off just playing the part. Maybe you smile when you're expected to. Maybe you talk softer in rooms where no one listens unless you shrink. Maybe you laugh on cue, respond how you're supposed to, become what others need. Until slowly, day by day, you forget where the performance ends and you begin. You don't notice it happening. It's not a lie. It's not deception. It's survival. And one day you wake up, look in the mirror, and the reflection staring back at you is polished, presentable, and utterly hollow. The performance identity mask. Not just a role, a life. This mask forms early, maybe in childhood. A boy who learned that being quiet earned him praise. A girl who noticed she was loved more when she was useful, helpful, obedient. They begin sculpting a character that others reward. You're such a good boy. You're so mature for your age. She's always smiling. These aren't just compliments, they're blueprints. A manual for how to earn belonging, how to be seen, how to exist. And once the mask starts to work, it sticks. Every performance gets applause, and the applause becomes oxygen. It's subtle at first. You wear the costume only when needed, at work, with friends, around certain people. But soon, the boundaries dissolve. You can't take it off. Because now, the mask doesn't just protect you, it defines you. People don't know the real you. Maybe you don't even know the real you anymore. And you're terrified that if you take it off, no one will clap, no one will stay, no one will care. There's a cruel kind of irony here. We perform to connect, but the performance itself creates distance. You're surrounded by people, but feel alone. You're praised, but feel unseen. You're known, but not known. Because they love the character, not the actor. This phenomenon is more common than we admit. Look at social media. Every post is curated, every smile rehearsed, every opinion calculated to be liked. We're not expressing, we're auditioning. For approval, for identity, for proof that we matter. We scroll and post and react, but underneath it all, we're whispering the same desperate question. Do you see me? Actors often speak of the moment they can't tell where the character ends and they begin. It's called identity fusion. The role bleeds into reality. But what happens when that identity isn't on a stage, but in your real life? when you've been the responsible one for so long that even your emotions feel scheduled, when you've been the funny one for so long that sadness feels like a betrayal of your image. The performance identity mask isn't just emotional, it becomes neurological. Studies in psychology show that repeated behaviors, especially those tied to reward and punishment, rewire the brain. Neural pathways form. Habits of thought, emotional suppression, automatic role-playing. Over time, the brain stops distinguishing between the real self and the performed self. And like any well-worn costume, it becomes second skin. Let's talk about burnout. Not just exhaustion, but identity burnout. It's when you feel drained not because of what you do, but because of who you have to pretend to be while doing it. Teachers who must always be patient. Leaders who must always be strong. Partners who must always be cheerful. You begin to dread interactions, not because you dislike others, but because you're tired of not being allowed to be you, of having to wear the mask just to be loved, just to be accepted. And then comes the applause. That's the most dangerous part. The applause makes the mask feel real. You get promoted, you get complimented. People admire you. They don't know you're miserable because you've trained them to love the mask. And the better you perform, the harder it is to admit you're struggling. Because if the mask cracks, the illusion shatters. Take the case of high performers, athletes, CEOs, influencers, people who live in constant feedback loops. Their identity becomes externalized. Who they are is defined by the reaction they receive. But when the applause fades, when the lights dim, many spiral, depression, anxiety, even suicidal thoughts, because they never developed a grounded sense of self beneath the mask. They weren't taught to ask, "What do I want?" Only, "What do they expect?" And this doesn't just happen to celebrities. It happens in homes, in relationships, in jobs. The mother who's always the caregiver. The man who must always be stoic. The friend who's always the peacekeeper. Slowly, subtly, the person inside suffocates. Not because they lack love, but because they're only loved conditionally. As long as you're useful. As long as you don't make waves. As long as you stay the same. So how do we remove the mask? Carefully, courageously. Not all at once, but piece by piece. Start by noticing the moments where you perform. Do you laugh when something isn't funny? Do you agree just to avoid conflict? Do you say yes when everything inside you wants to scream no? These are clues, moments where the mask speaks instead of you. Then, find safe spaces to practice honesty. Not brutal honesty, but vulnerable truth. I'm not okay today. I disagree with that. I actually don't like doing this. These seem like small steps, but every time you speak from your core, not your costume, you reclaim yourself. And perhaps most importantly, learn to sit in silence without applause. Can you still feel valid when no one's clapping? Can you still feel worthy when no one's watching? That's the deepest freedom, when your value is no longer a performance, but a quiet, steady presence inside you. You are not the role you play. You are not the version of yourself that others prefer. You are not the applause, or the likes, or the praise. You are what remains when the show ends, when the lights go out, when no one is looking. And that person, unpolished, unfiltered, unscripted, is the only one who can truly be free. The emotional echo trap. You're walking through your day, maybe at work, maybe in a conversation with someone you barely know. Nothing unusual, and then just a tone, a glance, a pause too long. Something small but sharp slips in. Your heart races, your chest tightens. You react, but you're not sure why. The situation didn't warrant that flood of emotion. It wasn't what they said. It was how they said it. You tell yourself you're overreacting. But deep inside, something else is playing out. And it's not about now. It's about then. This is the emotional echo trap. It begins with a voice. Maybe it's a supervisor asking you to redo something, and the words are neutral. But the tone, the disappointment hidden behind politeness, slices through you. And before your conscious mind can intervene, you feel it. That old, familiar burn of shame. Not from this person, not from this moment, but from a parent who never said, "I'm proud of you." From a teacher who made you feel invisible. From an ex who used silence like a weapon. And suddenly, you're no longer here. You're not just in a meeting, you're in a memory. And your nervous system doesn't know the difference. This is what makes the emotional echo trap so powerful and so dangerous. Because it doesn't announce itself. It doesn't come with a label saying, "Warning, this is from your childhood." It disguises itself as intuition, as gut feeling, as truth. You say things like, "I just have a bad feeling about him," or "She reminds me of someone I don't trust." But what's really happening is, your past is bleeding into your present, and you're mistaking emotional residue for wisdom. Psychologists call it emotional transference. It's when we unconsciously redirect feelings from one person to another, usually because of unresolved wounds. A father's coldness can echo in the eyes of a boss. A sibling's jealousy might echo in a friend's joke. A partner's affection might awaken grief if it reminds you of love that was lost too early. These echoes aren't logic, they're landmines. They wait under the surface until someone steps just right. And boom, you're 10 years old again, or 15, or back in that one room with that one person who made you feel small. And here's the cruel trick. The echo feels realer than the moment, because emotional memory doesn't work like a file in a drawer. It's more like a live wire. When triggered, the body reacts before the brain can explain. Cortisol floods, breathing shifts, muscles tense. You become a soldier in a war that ended years ago, but the battlefield has changed. The war is now inside you. Let's take an example. Imagine someone named Ria. She's in her 30s, confident on the outside, successful by most standards. But in romantic relationships, she always ends up pulling away. Her partners say she seems warm one moment and distant the next. She can't explain it. She says she doesn't trust easily. But trust isn't the issue. The issue is that her partner's affection, simple, kind, and consistent, echoes the tone her father used right before disappearing for days without explanation. Back then, warmth was followed by absence. So now, even gentle affection feels like a setup. Her body flinches not because of the man in front of her, but because of the shadow behind her. She's not reacting to him. She's reacting to the echo. Or take Arjun, who snaps at authority figures. He prides himself on standing up for himself, on not letting anyone talk down to him. But his rage isn't about his manager correcting a spreadsheet. It's about being 10 years old and hearing his coach say, "You'll never make the team, you're too weak." The comment buried itself deep. Now, every time someone even hints at criticism, that echo rings, and Arjun reacts, not as a grown man, but as that humiliated child trying to reclaim his worth. These echoes don't just haunt, they hijack. They distort how we see others, how we interpret tone, how we assign motive. A casual text becomes passive-aggressive. A missed call becomes rejection. A firm boundary feels like betrayal. And worst of all, we rarely realize it's happening. We don't say, "I'm being triggered by my emotional history." We say, "He's a jerk," or "She doesn't care about me." We externalize what began internally. The tragedy of the emotional echo trap is not just in the pain it revives, but in the relationships it ruins. Because when you respond to someone based on a ghost, you rob them of their reality. You never meet them. Only the version your past has painted onto them. And in doing so, you lose something precious. The chance to respond from your truth, not your trauma. So how do we escape it? First, we name it. Awareness is antidote. The next time you feel a disproportionate emotional response, pause. Ask, is this about now or is this familiar? Does this feeling have a history? If so, whose voice am I really hearing? Whose eyes am I looking into? Second, we slow down. Emotional echoes thrive in speed, in quick judgments, in knee-jerk reactions. But when we slow the loop, when we create space between trigger and response, we invite clarity. And sometimes, that's all we need, to remember that the person in front of us is not our parent, not our bully, not our abuser, just another imperfect human. Third, we heal what echoes. This means doing the slow, hard work of feeling what we tried to bury. It might mean therapy. It might mean writing letters you never send. It might mean finally admitting, yes, that hurt me, that shaped me, that made me flinch when I hear kindness, or push away when I feel seen. Healing doesn't erase the echo, but it turns it down. So, it no longer drowns out the voice of the present, because at the end of the day, life isn't meant to be lived in reruns. You deserve to experience people for who they are, not who they remind you of. You deserve to love without defense, to receive without suspicion, to stand in a moment without 1,000 ghosts whispering from the past. And yes, it takes courage to see the trap, to admit you've been caught in it, and then to choose again, to rewrite instinct, to meet the world with eyes not clouded by memory, but cleared by truth. Because the most powerful thing you can do, the most radical act, is to break the echo, to feel the pull of the past, and walk forward anyway. That is how you reclaim your life. That is how the trap ends. The familiar chaos cycle. You say you want peace. You say you're tired of the drama, the conflict, the heartbreak. But when silence finally comes, you don't trust it. You flinch. You stir. You reach for chaos again, even if you don't realize it. This isn't self-sabotage. It's survival wiring. The truth is brutal. Your nervous system doesn't care about what's good for you. It only cares about what's familiar, and if pain, disorder, and emotional volatility were your normal, that's what you will unconsciously seek out. Again, and again, and again. We call it the familiar chaos cycle. It's the haunting pullback into dysfunction. Not because you love it, but because it's what your body recognizes as home. Your childhood home might not have had screaming or slammed doors, but if love was unpredictable, if affection was earned through performance, if moods shifted like storms, then your internal baseline became calibrated to instability. You learned how to brace for it, how to tiptoe around it, how to stay alert in the fire. And now, when life offers calm, you don't feel safe. You feel exposed, vulnerable, like something must be wrong. So what do? You create movement. You pick fights. You chase people who won't stay. You overcommit. You scroll until your mind burns out. You dive into projects, dramas, or relationships that simulate intensity. Not because you're reckless, but because your body is trying to re-anchor to a rhythm it understands. Chaos. Let's be clear. This isn't about blame. This is about biology. The amygdala, the fear center of your brain, learns through repetition. And the more it experiences a pattern, even if it's toxic, the more it labels that pattern as safe. Safe doesn't mean good. Safe just means known. So, when you step into environments that are actually healthy, ones with emotional stability, honesty, and consistency, it feels alien, untrustworthy. You get bored, or you feel numb. You say things like, I don't know, it just didn't feel right. That off feeling isn't your intuition. It's your trauma bond with chaos trying to reassert control. Ever wonder why people leave good relationships for bad ones? Why someone can escape years of abuse only to walk back into another version of it? This isn't weakness. This is neurochemical addiction. Adrenaline, cortisol, and dopamine all play their part. When you're in a heightened emotional state, even if it's pain, your brain rewards you with stimulation. That rush becomes a drug. And when it's gone, the silence feels unbearable. You mistake emptiness for loss. Peace feels like abandonment. You crave a hit of chaos again. Consider someone who grew up with a parent whose affection was conditional. Warm one day, cold the next. That child learned not to expect consistency. Instead, they learned to hustle for love, to perform, please, or provoke. Fast forward to adulthood, and they might find themselves in relationships with emotionally unavailable partners. Not by accident, but by design, because their body knows how to dance with uncertainty. Predictable love doesn't spark the same alertness. It doesn't match the survival dance they practiced for years, so they walk away from healthy connections and run toward familiar pain. Not because they want it, but because they are it. This cycle isn't limited to relationships. It can show up in work, in friendships, in how you treat yourself. If your nervous system is addicted to pressure, you'll procrastinate just to feel the adrenaline of a last-minute deadline. If you're used to emotional neglect, you'll dismiss your own needs, calling it independence. If you're used to scarcity, you'll reject abundance when it arrives. Chaos becomes the lens through which you interpret reality, and without it, you feel lost. Breaking this cycle is not about logic. You can know something is bad for you and still run straight into it. You can understand the patterns and still feel powerless to stop them, because healing doesn't begin in the mind. It begins in the body. You have to rewire safety. Teach your nervous system that peace isn't danger, that stability isn't a trap. That love that stays doesn't mean you've let your guard down. It means you're finally allowed to exhale. This is slow work. This is breath work. This is inner child work. This is sitting in silence and not rushing to fill it. It's choosing the boring person, the calm friend, the job that doesn't thrill you but doesn't destroy you either. It's learning to feel your feelings instead of escaping them. And it's incredibly hard, because you're grieving a part of you that only knew how to survive by spinning in circles. But on the other side of that grief is something radical: freedom. The ability to choose what feels right, not just what feels familiar. The ability to stay in a moment without needing to escape it. The ability to rest without guilt. To love without panic. To receive without needing to repay. Imagine that. Your chaos wasn't your fault, but your healing is your responsibility. You can't keep calling trauma your personality. You can't keep normalizing suffering just because you were trained in it. You're allowed to rewrite the script, even if your body screams at first. Even if peace feels unbearable, that's not proof something's wrong. That's proof you're breaking the cycle. And when you do, something strange happens. The world softens. You notice the quiet beauty, the people who don't want to hurt you, the stillness that doesn't scare you anymore. You no longer mistake calm for emptiness. You no longer seek fire to feel alive. You finally realize that life doesn't have to be a battlefield. It can be a home, but you have to choose it. Every single day. You have to notice the urge to run and pause. You have to breathe through the panic of stillness. You have to let peace feel awkward until it feels natural. Because if you don't, the familiar chaos cycle will drag you back. And it doesn't care how smart you are, how much you've read, how badly you want change. It only cares about what feels normal. So make peace your new normal. Let stability become your addiction. Let safety be your new thrill. Not because it's easy, but because you deserve to live a life that doesn't hurt just to feel real. The internal critic's voice. You're alone. The room is silent. But there it is again, that voice. Low, firm, familiar. You're not good enough. You'll never make it. Why would anyone care what you have to say? It doesn't scream, it doesn't shout, it just is, like static in your thoughts, a constant hum that drowns out hope. And the most dangerous part? You think it's your voice. But it's not. The truth is, the harsh voice in your head isn't yours. It's a remix. A stitched-together collage of every criticism, every disapproving glance, every moment someone made you feel small. It's the sum of your earliest wounds, repeated so often, so subtly, that it slipped past your defenses and made itself at home. Somewhere along the way, your brain mistook external judgment for internal truth. And now, it whispers lies to you in your own tone. Think back. That teacher who mocked your question in front of the class. That parent who called you lazy before they ever asked what was wrong. The coach who said you weren't tough enough. The sibling who told you to shut up. The friend who laughed at your dreams. Those weren't just moments. They were seeds. And when they fell into the fertile soil of a young, developing mind, they grew into a voice, a script, that still plays in the background of your life. And here's the most twisted part. That voice pretends to be helpful. It tells you it's keeping you in check, that it's being realistic, that it's protecting you from failure, from embarrassment, from shame. But in truth, it's not protecting you. It's paralyzing you. It tells you not to try, not to speak, not to trust, not to believe in yourself. Because if you fail, it gets to say, "See, I told you so." And if you succeed, it vanishes. It has no script for your victories. That voice, your so-called inner critic, isn't a guardian of truth. It's a fossilized echo of other people's pain. It's what hurt people said to you when they didn't know how to love you properly. And now, it's your own mind replaying their ignorance as if it were wisdom. But it gets worse. Over time, we don't just listen to the voice. We defend it. We build lives around it. Careers, relationships, limits. We choose partners who reinforce it. We sabotage opportunities that threaten to disprove it. Because if the inner critic is wrong, then everything we've believed about ourselves might fall apart. So instead, we let it win. Quietly, consistently. Every time we stay silent when we want to speak. Every time we nod instead of objecting. Every time we abandon our dreams before the world even gets a chance to doubt us. We call it being humble, being careful, being realistic. But deep down, we know It's fear. It's learned self-rejection. And yet, you were not born with that voice. You learned it. And anything learned can be unlearned. Children don't doubt themselves. They draw wild shapes and call them dragons. They dance without rhythm. They sing off-key at full volume. They believe they are worthy of love just by existing. But then life happens. And little by little, that radiant self-confidence is carved away, replaced by rules, expectations, labels, until one day you wake up and hear a voice inside that doesn't sound like the child you were. It sounds like a judge, a critic, a bully. And because it speaks in your head, you assume it must be speaking truth. But just because a voice is internal doesn't make it yours. Start to notice it. Not with anger, not with shame, but with curiosity. Whose voice is that really? Is it your father's disappointment, your teacher's condescension, a classmate's cruelty? Trace the roots. You'll find that most of your self-hate never actually started with you. It was projected onto you, in moments of vulnerability, and your brain, trying to survive, made the voice sound like your own. But now, survival isn't the goal. It's time to live. And that means recognizing the imposter. That means pausing when the voice tells you you're not ready and asking, says who? It means writing the book even when the voice says, no one will care. It means walking into the room and owning your space even when the voice says, you don't belong. It means replacing the critic with a guardian, one who reminds you where you've come from, one who speaks with kindness, who doesn't lie to flatter, but doesn't wound to motivate either. You see, self-growth isn't about silencing the voice. It's about questioning its authority, about realizing that your inner narrative doesn't have to be your inner truth, that you have the power to rewrite the script. Start small. Every time the voice shows up, name it. Not me. But, oh, there's that teacher again. There's that memory again. Naming creates distance. And in that space, you find freedom. Eventually, something strange happens. You hear the voice, but you don't believe it. You feel the fear, but you move anyway. You sense the old script playing, but you stop dancing to its rhythm. And slowly, the voice gets quieter. Not because it's gone, but because you've stopped giving it power. And in that silence, something more powerful begins to emerge. Not the critic, not the remix, but the real you. The voice that says, I'm enough. The voice that says, I can try. The voice that says, I belong here. That voice was always inside you, just buried beneath the noise. It's time to unearth it, because the loudest voice isn't always the truest. And the voice in your head, it's not your destiny, it's your conditioning. You don't owe your past the rest of your life. The safety overgrowth reflex. It started with something simple, a moment when you felt afraid, when the world tilted just enough to make you guard yourself. Maybe someone yelled, maybe you failed, maybe you reached out and no one caught you. In that instant, your mind drew a line. Not again, it whispered. This hurts. And so, you learned to protect yourself, to pull back, to avoid. At first, it was smart, necessary. You stopped walking down that dangerous street. You stopped trusting the person who lied. You stopped putting your hand in the fire. But then something happened. So quietly you didn't notice. The reflex didn't stop growing. What began as a survival instinct became a lifestyle. What started as wisdom became a wall. Slowly, without intention, you began to avoid not just pain, but life itself. This is the safety overgrowth reflex. The moment your protective instincts grow wild, so wild they strangle every possibility before it even breathes. You say no to new things without knowing why. You hesitate before expressing excitement. You distrust joy because you've seen it vanish. You keep your dreams vague because if you never define them, you can't fail at them. You walk away from love not because it's wrong, but because it feels too much like risk. And this isn't cowardice. This is what trauma does. Not just the big, loud kind, war, abuse, catastrophe, but the quiet, cumulative kind. The small rejections, the subtle betrayals, the moments when you showed up and weren't met. Your brain remembers. So, it builds safety nets, invisible rules. Stories like, I'm not good at that, or people like me don't succeed, or I'm just not the type to take risks. But none of these are true. They're scars that shape themselves into identity. And here's the cruel part. The brain that builds these defenses does so out of love. It wants to keep you safe. It believes danger lurks behind every unfamiliar door. So it floods you with doubt. It sharpens your inner critic. It whispers worst-case scenarios until you freeze. And over time, you confuse that voice with wisdom. But safety isn't always wisdom. Sometimes, it's paralysis wearing a suit. Think of a plant that's overgrown. At first, the vines protected it from wind and cold. But left unchecked, they wrapped around its own branches, cutting off light. The thing that once helped it survive, now strangles it. That's what the safety overgrowth reflex does to your soul. You become hyper-alert. You analyze every possibility, every outcome. You replay conversations, scan faces for signs of rejection, edit yourself before you speak. You avoid not just conflict, but uncertainty, creativity, intimacy, ambition. You become a master of micro-escapes, never fully present, always one step behind your own life. And the saddest part, you don't feel safe. You just feel numb. Because safety without aliveness is just a cage with pillows. Growth demands risk. Always has. The first time you tried to walk, you fell. The first time you trusted, you got hurt. But without those moments, without leaning into discomfort, nothing ever expands. Not your courage, not your capacity, not your story. And you know this. Deep down, you remember how it felt to leap, to love without conditions, to try without guarantees, before the reflex took over. But now you pause before everything. You prepare. You research. You wait for the perfect timing, the perfect conditions, the perfect version of you that feels ready. But readiness is a myth. There's only now. There's only the choice to either continue shrinking into comfort or stretch into the unknown. And yes, it's terrifying, because to untangle the overgrowth, you have to question every rule you've obeyed. You have to face every moment your brain said, stay small. You have to walk directly toward the edge your instinct said to avoid. But on the other side, light, possibility. That long-forgotten part of you that still burns quietly beneath the layers. The part that wants to risk something real, even if it means pain. Not recklessly, not blindly, but willingly. Because life isn't found in perfect safety. It's found in brave presence, in the shaky voice that speaks anyway, in the trembling step that moves forward, in the attempt that might fail, but matters. So ask yourself, what have you been calling safe that's really just silent fear? What dream have you downsized in the name of being practical? What connection have you distanced because closeness felt dangerous? What version of yourself have you buried beneath layers of protection? And are you willing now to come home to that version? It starts small. Say yes to the invitation, even if it makes your heart race. Share your truth, even if your voice shakes. Launch the project, even if it's imperfect. Let yourself be seen, even if it means rejection. Not because it's safe, but because it's real. That's how you reclaim your life from the reflex. Not by killing the instinct, but by reminding it who's in charge now. You, not the fear, not the overgrowth. Just you, raw, scared, awake, and ready to live again. The mirror of projection. You spot it instantly, that arrogance in someone's voice, that impatience in their tone, that selfishness in their actions. You react, maybe with irritation, maybe with silent contempt, maybe with a quiet withdrawal. But what if that thing you despise is yours, not theirs? What if you're not reacting to them at all, but to a part of yourself you've buried, denied, or disowned? This is the mirror of projection, a psychological trap so subtle, so universal, that most people never realize they're staring at their own reflection, hating what they see in someone else. Projection is one of the mind's oldest defense mechanisms. When we feel something we can't tolerate, anger, jealousy, weakness, fear, we unconsciously displace it onto others. Instead of facing the discomfort within, we externalize it. It's not me who's selfish, it's them. I'm not insecure, they're just arrogant. I'm not judgmental. I just speak the truth. We believe this story because it protects our fragile sense of self. But that protection comes at a cost. Self-deception, broken relationships, and a growing blind spot that eventually turns us into the very thing we're trying to avoid. This process begins deep in the unconscious. The mind contains not just thoughts we know, but thoughts we refuse to know. Carl Jung called it the shadow. All the traits, impulses, and desires we repress because they don't match the version of ourselves we want to believe in. The kind, helpful person who secretly envies others' success. the loyal friend who resents the constant sacrifices they make, the peaceful mediator who simmers with unspoken rage. These parts don't disappear. They just hide in the dark and wait. But shadows don't stay quiet forever. They find ways to surface, and projection is their favorite disguise. Because what better way to stay hidden than to attack themselves in someone else? Think about it. Why does a small mistake by someone else sometimes trigger a huge emotional reaction in you? Why do you overreact to things that seem minor? Why do certain people instantly irritate you, while others, doing the same thing, don't? The answer is almost always, you're not reacting to reality. You're reacting to a reflection. A man who was taught to suppress emotion may mock others for being too sensitive. A woman told never to be angry might find herself constantly criticizing those who express frustration. A person afraid of being seen as selfish might accuse others of always taking. And the deeper the fear, the louder the projection. This is not just theory. It's observable in every part of human life. Relationships fall apart because of projections. Lovers argue over things that aren't truly about the other person, but about unresolved wounds from the past. A child reminds you of a parent you haven't forgiven. A partner triggers the same feeling of abandonment you never processed. And so, you project. Not out of cruelty, but out of pain. Even social hatred is born from this mirror. Prejudices, scapegoating, mass dehumanization. So often, it's not about the other group. It's about disowned parts of the self projected onto them. History is full of tyrants who claim to rid society of impurity while hiding their own corruption. We hate in others what we are terrified to see in ourselves. And what's worse, the more you deny your shadow, the more power it gains. Projection doesn't remove the trait from your psyche. It amplifies it. Like pushing a beach ball underwater, it always pops up somewhere else. And eventually, it rules you from behind the curtain. But here's the shift. What if you use the mirror? What if every time someone triggered you, irritated you, angered you, you paused and asked, what part of me is this touching? Not in blame, in curiosity. Because in that pause lies the doorway to radical self-awareness. Let's say someone is being boastful. Before you roll your eyes, ask yourself, is there a part of me that craves recognition too? Is their confidence triggering my own insecurity? Or maybe someone is cold and dismissive. Is that reminding you of how you treat yourself when you fail? Or is it reflecting a part of you that's afraid to be vulnerable? When you turn the projection inward, the trigger becomes a teacher. The judgment becomes a map. And slowly what used to provoke you becomes a mirror that frees you. Because every projection, once owned, loses its power over you. This doesn't mean everyone is innocent. People do harm. People lie, cheat, manipulate. But knowing projection doesn't excuse them. It just refines you. It gives you the clarity to respond instead of react, to see people for who they are, not through the fog of your own unhealed wounds. You stop projecting and start perceiving. It's not easy. The ego resists. It would rather blame than look inward. But ego is brittle. Soul is honest. And when you start living soul first, you realize that what you despise in others is your invitation to meet the forgotten parts of yourself. So, the next time you're triggered, don't run. Don't lash out. Don't hide. Stand in front of the mirror. Ask the harder question. What part of me is speaking? What truth am I avoiding? What shadow is trying to be seen? Because the only way to break free from projection is to finally recognize the face staring back at you. The void-filling habit. ChatGPT said, you wake up. There's no immediate danger, no crisis, no fire to put out. But something feels off. A weightless kind of pressure. A whisper of emptiness that follows you through the day like a shadow. So what do? You reach for your phone, you scroll. Not because you're curious, but because silence feels unbearable. You snack, not out of hunger, but out of need. You open tabs, apps, conversations. You fill your space with sound, movement, distraction. And without realizing it, you've fallen into one of the most insidious traps of modern existence, the void-filling habit. This isn't about laziness. It isn't even about addiction. It's about survival. Somewhere along the way, we learn to equate stillness with discomfort, and discomfort with danger. So we fill. With content, with calories, with chaos. Anything to cover the hollow thump beneath the surface. The void. And what is the void? It's not just loneliness. It's not just boredom. It's deeper than that. It's the ache of unmet needs, of unlived truths, of parts of yourself you abandoned long ago in exchange for approval, safety, or belonging. It's the part of you that wonders, is this it? While smiling in a meeting. It's the question you never ask. What would I be without all this noise? The void isn't the problem. The problem is how we try to avoid it, because the more we fill, the louder the noise gets, and the harder it becomes to hear what the emptiness is actually trying to say. You scroll for hours, then feel worse. You buy something, then regret it. You talk to people but still feel unknown. And the void remains, quiet, patient, undisturbed beneath the surface layer of your distractions. This pattern becomes a habit, but not just any habit. It becomes your default, your comfort, your invisible ritual. Feel uneasy, open Instagram, feel small, add something to the cart, feel purposeless. Watch 4 episodes. It's not pleasure, it's anesthesia. You're not feeding yourself, you're numbing yourself, you're not escaping the void, you're decorating it. But here's the brutal truth. The void cannot be filled from the outside. No matter how much you consume, it won't translate to peace. Because what you're actually hungry for is presence, meaning, wholeness, not likes or sugar or noise. You're hungry to feel real again. Take Rohan, for example. Every night he tells himself he'll sleep early. But by 1 a.m., he's still awake, deep in a YouTube rabbit hole, watching people live lives he feels disconnected from. In the morning, he's exhausted and angry with himself. But that exhaustion is easier to bear than the silence he feels when he turns off the screen. He's not lazy, he's not unmotivated. He's just scared of what might rise if he gives that silence room to speak. Or Maya. She shops compulsively. Her wardrobe overflows, but she still says, I have nothing to wear. Because the clothes aren't about style. They're armor. Every purchase gives her a 5-second dopamine hit, just enough to forget the emptiness she can't explain. She doesn't need more outfits. She needs to feel visible, validated. Like she matters even without the packaging. The void-filling habit is everywhere. It hides in productivity too. Overworking, overplanning, overcommitting. It says, if I just do enough, be enough, achieve enough, then I won't have to feel this emptiness. But burnout isn't the cure for inner drought. Eventually the noise collapses and what's left is a soul screaming, can you hear me now? So what do? We stop running. We sit. Not forever. Just long enough to listen, to ask the questions we're terrified of. What am I really missing? What have I been trying to avoid? What if this ache isn't a flaw, but a signal? This is not about shame. This is about truth. We all have voids. Gaps formed by loss, trauma, disconnection, unmet potential. The goal is not to pretend they're not there. The goal is to stop feeding them junk when what they crave is authenticity. And yes, it will be uncomfortable. The first time you sit with the void instead of running from it, your skin might crawl. You might feel like you're drowning in nothing. But keep breathing. Keep noticing. Because beneath that emptiness is something sacred, a doorway back to yourself. In that silence, you might remember the passions you buried, the questions you never dared to ask, the dreams you traded for stability. The person you once were before life demanded you become someone else. The void is not your enemy. It is your mirror. It shows you what's missing, not to torment you, but to invite you, to come back, to rebuild, to reintroduce yourself to your own soul. You'll know you're breaking the habit when you stop reaching for your phone the moment you sit down, when you pause before biting, buying, binging, when you let discomfort pass through you instead of burying it under activity. That's when the noise starts to fade, and what you hear in its place is something quiet, but powerful. Yourself. Because maybe the void was never empty. Maybe it was full of all the things you forgot to feel, all the pieces of you waiting to be welcomed home. The identity confirmation bias. You don't really see yourself. You see the story you've built about yourself, and then you search the world for proof that it's true. Every day your brain filters reality, not to reflect the truth, but to confirm the identity you've already chosen, or the one that was handed to you. This is the trap of identity confirmation bias, and it doesn't just distort your view of others, it distorts you. If you believe you're a failure, your brain won't highlight your progress. It'll point to the one mistake you made last week. If you believe you're unlovable, it won't register acts of kindness. It'll amplify the moment someone forgot to text you back. If you believe you're not smart enough, you'll disregard every accomplishment and obsess over one small error. You think you're being honest with yourself, but really, you're just collecting evidence to defend a label, even when it's hurting you. That's what makes this bias so dangerous. It feels like self-awareness. It feels like humility, but it's really self-confirmation in disguise. You're not testing who you are. You're protecting who you believe you are. The moment a new piece of evidence threatens your identity, you subconsciously reject it. You downplay it. You say, "That's not me," even if it is. Your brain is not designed for truth. It's designed for consistency. And identity is its most cherished illusion. From the time you were a child, you were given labels. Good student, troublemaker, sensitive one, overachiever, lazy, creative, dramatic. Some of those labels may have had truth in them, but over time, they fossilized into identity. You started seeing the world and yourself through the lens of that narrative. Every compliment you couldn't accept, every opportunity you turned down, every person you pushed away. It wasn't just self-sabotage, it was identity protection. Let's say someone grew up being told they were too emotional. Over time, they might wear that label like armor. Every time they feel something deeply, they shrug and say, "That's just who I am." But what if they're not too emotional? What if they're just human in a world that taught them to suppress feelings? Still, their brain scans the world for proof. A breakup? See, I'm too much. A friend doesn't call? See, I care more than others do. They live in a loop of reconfirming their label, not because it's true, but because it's known. Or imagine someone who believes they're a burden. They'll interpret silence as rejection, kindness as pity, distance as proof. Not because it's accurate, but because it fits the identity. Even when someone says, "I care about you," they won't fully believe it, because that belief would challenge the core narrative. And challenging the narrative feels unsafe. This is how you stay stuck. You don't stay stuck because change is impossible. You stay stuck because change would require grief. The grief of letting go of who you thought you were, of realizing you were wrong about yourself. That's terrifying, because even your pain has become part of your personality, and without it, who would you be? But here's the raw truth. Your identity is not a fact. It's a fragile agreement between your past, your perception, and your patterns, and it's allowed to evolve. Who you were at 12, at 18, at 25 was not the full story. You are not frozen in the worst moments of your life. You are not permanently stained by someone else's opinion. You are not bound to the identity your survival once needed. But to escape the identity confirmation bias, you have to do something radical. You have to become willing to be wrong about yourself, to test your beliefs like a scientist, not a judge, to say, what if I'm not unlovable? What if I am capable? What if I'm not broken, just healing? These aren't affirmations, they're hypotheses, and you test them by stepping into moments that feel uncomfortable, not because they're dangerous, but because they're unfamiliar. You accept praise even when it makes you squirm. You try the thing you think you will fail at. You open the message you're afraid to read. You show up again and again, not to prove you're right about your limits, but to find out what's actually true. And when the old voice in your head says, "This isn't me," you ask, "Who told me that? When did I decide that? And is it still serving me?" Because every label you carry came from somewhere, a moment, a person, a wound, and you get to question it. You get to peel it off. You get to rewrite the file in your brain that says who you are, because maybe you're not lazy, you're burned out. Maybe you're not dramatic, you're expressive. Maybe you're not bad at love. You've just never seen it modeled in a way that made sense to your nervous system. Maybe you're not hard to love. You're just surrounded by people who don't know how to love deeply. If your brain is going to search for proof anyway, give it new things to look for. Proof that you're growing, that you're more than the role you played in someone else's story, that you are allowed to evolve, even if it disappoints people who only knew the old you. You don't owe your past identity anything. You don't have to keep repeating the same loop just because it's familiar. You are allowed to become a stranger to your old self. You are allowed to shock your reflection. And no, it won't happen overnight. It takes time. But identity isn't something you find. It's something you build, one belief at a time. So when you catch yourself looking for proof that you're not good enough, Pause. Ask yourself, am I collecting facts or am I protecting a story? Because the difference between who you are and who you think you are might just be the life you've been waiting to live. The overthinking defense loop. You're staring at the ceiling, again. Your mind is racing, again. Replaying that conversation for the 100th time. Rethinking what you said, what they said, what you should have said. And you tell yourself you're just trying to understand, to get clarity. But deep down, you know what this really is. It's a loop, a mental fortress, a maze with no exit. And every thought, every angle, every hypothetical, it's not helping you heal. It's helping you hide. This is the overthinking defense loop. It looks like logic. It sounds like wisdom. It even feels like control. But really, it's fear, dressed up as analysis. You start with something simple, an emotion, maybe sadness, maybe confusion, maybe the sting of rejection or the ache of loneliness. But instead of letting yourself feel it, you grab your mental toolkit. You try to solve it. You dissect it. You debate it. You try to understand it so deeply, so thoroughly, that maybe, just maybe, you'll avoid the pain at its center. Because thinking feels safe. Thinking feels like action. Thinking gives you the illusion that you're doing something. But emotion isn't a problem to solve. It's a message to receive. And when you treat it like a riddle, you miss the point. Imagine your emotions like someone knocking at your door. Sadness, anger, fear. Each one a visitor with something to say. But instead of opening the door, you go to the whiteboard. You start drawing charts, asking questions. Why are they here? What do they want? What time did they knock yesterday? What if I pretend I'm not home? And while you plan and analyze and strategize, they're still there, waiting, not to attack, but to be acknowledged. That's the trick of overthinking. It makes you feel smart while keeping you stuck. Because let's be honest, if thinking alone could fix everything, you'd be healed by now. If logic could solve pain, you wouldn't feel like this. But the truth is, no matter how hard you try to think your way out of discomfort, your heart doesn't speak in logic. It speaks in signals, sensations, patterns. It doesn't want you to fix everything. It wants you to listen. But listening is hard, because listening means feeling. And feeling means vulnerability. And vulnerability? That means risk. What if I fall apart? What if I can't handle it? What if the pain doesn't stop? So you think instead. You loop. You create emotional spreadsheets and flowcharts for things that don't follow formulas. You live in your head because your heart feels too loud, too chaotic, too unpredictable. And maybe you learned this early. Maybe you were a child who had to grow up too fast. A kid who figured out that thinking got rewarded, but feeling got punished. That being the smart one was safer than being the sensitive one. Maybe you got hurt once, deeply, and your brain said, never again. And it started building defenses made of thoughts, of endless planning, of hypothetical futures that never arrive. But now, you're an adult, and the armor is heavy. The loop is loud, and the emotions you've tried to outthink, they're still there, buried, unheard. Here's the truth you've been avoiding. Thinking is not the enemy, but when it becomes your only tool, it turns into a trap. You don't need to stop thinking. You need to balance it. You need to give your emotions a seat at the table, not the driver's seat, but not the basement either. They're messengers, that's all. Not monsters, not threats, just signals, telling you what matters, where it hurts, what needs attention. Try this. Next time your thoughts start spiraling, pause, breathe. Ask yourself, what am I actually feeling right now? Not what you should feel, not what makes sense, but what's there, beneath the thoughts. Maybe it's fear. Maybe it's grief. Maybe it's an old story you never got to finish. Let it speak. Let it move. Cry if you have to. Scream if you need to. But feel it. Not to fix it, but to free it. Because emotions that are heard don't need to shout. They don't need to hijack your thoughts. They don't need to disguise themselves as analysis. Once they're acknowledged, they soften. They pass. They make space. And suddenly your thinking becomes clearer, lighter, more creative, more kind. This is not about choosing emotion over reason. It's about integrating both. Your mind was made to solve problems. Your heart was made to sense meaning. And when they work together, you're unstoppable. When your mind is doing all the work alone, it gets tired, it gets loud, it gets lost. You are not broken for overthinking. You're protecting yourself the only way you learned how. But now, maybe it's time for a new way, a gentler way, a way that listens before analyzing, that feels before solving, that embraces emotion, not as weakness, but as information. Because at the center of every thought spiral, there's usually just one quiet emotion, whispering, "Please don't ignore me." And once you finally stop trying to solve the feeling, once you simply sit with it, breathe with it, hold it like a small child, you realize something profound. It was never that scary. It never wanted to hurt you. It just wanted to be seen. And when you let it speak, the loop finally ends. The emotional home setting. You can change your clothes, you can change your job, you can change your location, your relationships, your goals. But there's one thing most people never realize they're still living with, until it's too late. Their emotional home, not the house they sleep in, but the state they return to over and over again, no matter what changes on the surface. It's like a thermostat, hidden deep inside the wiring of your nervous system. And no matter how high or low life swings, it pulls you back to the setting it was trained to believe is normal. For some, it's sadness. For others, it's anxiety, shame, guilt, or numbness. And it doesn't matter if something good happens, they'll still find their way back to that familiar feeling. Because the nervous system doesn't care about what's good. It cares about what's known. And what's known is often what was taught in early life. If your home growing up was full of tension, your body learned to live in high alert. If love was conditional, your brain associated affection with performance. If peace was rare, then chaos became comfort. If emotions were shut down, you learned to silence your own. So now, even as an adult, you repeat the cycle, unconsciously. You sabotage calm because it feels foreign. You recreate stress because it feels like home. You distrust happiness because it doesn't match the emotional blueprint you were given. And this isn't weakness, it's biology. The human nervous system is like a musician. It memorizes the tune it hears the most. If your early tune was sadness, you'll find ways to return to it. If your baseline was rejection, you'll unconsciously seek out situations that confirm it. Not because you enjoy it, but because predictable pain feels safer than unfamiliar joy. Imagine someone who grew up never being heard. They learn that being quiet keeps the peace. Now, they're praised in their job, encouraged to speak, but every time they do, their heart races. It's not the present causing anxiety, it's the past reacting through the body. Or take someone who grew up around yelling and conflict. When things are calm in their relationship, they feel uneasy. So they start picking fights, not out of malice, but because calm feels unnatural. The nervous system says, "This can't be trusted. We don't know how to survive this." This is the trap. No matter how much you change externally, if your emotional home stays the same, you always return. You win the game, but feel like a fraud. You find love, but brace for abandonment. You move to a new city, but carry the same storms inside. And then you wonder why nothing feels different. Because transformation isn't just about what you do. It's about what you allow yourself to feel safe in. Your emotional home is the place your mind returns to when nothing is demanding your attention. It's the weather you live in when no one's watching. And if that emotional climate is cold, stormy, or dark, then even sunlight feels threatening. But here's the truth most people never hear. You can change your setting. It takes time. It takes awareness. It takes learning to sit in new emotions long enough for your body to realize, this is also safe. That joy doesn't mean it'll be taken away. That calm isn't a setup for collapse. That love can exist without needing to be earned. But first, you have to stop identifying with the weather you inherited. You are not your anxiety. You are not your anger. You are not your sadness. You are the observer of those patterns. The one who can say, "This isn't mine, it was given to me, and I no longer have to carry it." To change your emotional home, you don't need to force happiness. You need to stay in moments of peace. You need to breathe through discomfort, not run from it. You need to catch yourself when you start spiraling. Not with shame, but with curiosity. Ask yourself, what am I returning to, and who taught me this was normal? And then gently, bravely, stay a little longer in the unfamiliar. If joy makes you twitch, hold it anyway. If love feels unbearable, receive it anyway. If silence scares you, listen to it anyway. You're not rewiring your life. You're rewiring your body's expectations of life. This is healing at the root, not just coping better, but changing the settings of the machine itself. And that kind of healing, it ripples, it reshapes your choices, it attracts different people, it opens doors you once couldn't see, because your emotional fog kept them hidden. So, if you've been looping, if the highs never last, if every change leads back to the same stuck place, don't ask what's wrong with your life. Ask what emotion your nervous system calls home, because that is where the pattern lives. And once you see it, you can change it. Not overnight, not perfectly, but moment by moment, new setting by new setting, until one day you realize you woke up and didn't go back. You stayed, you lived, and your body finally learned that this peace, this joy, this love is home now. The Learned Helplessness Program. You tried once, maybe even twice, and it didn't work. The door didn't open. The answer didn't come. The result you wanted never showed up. And something inside you whispered, "Stop, don't do this again." Not because you're weak, not because you're lazy, but because your brain, quietly, mechanically, made a decision for you. It stored the failure, not the effort. It encoded the pain, not the possibility. And now, every time you reach for change, it pulls you back. This is the Learned Helplessness Program, a hidden script in your mind that convinces you to surrender before you've even begun to fight. The term learned helplessness came from a grim experiment in the 1960s. Psychologists Martin Seligman and Stephen Meyer placed dogs in a harness and exposed them to a mild electric shock. Some dogs could stop the shocks by pressing a panel. Others couldn't, no matter what they did. Later, when placed in a new environment where escape was easy, the dogs that had previously been powerless didn't even try. They just lay down. They'd learned to be helpless. It's a disturbing image, but it's not about dogs. It's about us, because our minds operate in much the same way. When we face repeated failures, when we experience loss we can't control, when we grow up in chaos or criticism or neglect, we begin to internalize a simple but deadly belief. Nothing I do makes a difference. And from that moment forward, every new challenge is filtered through the lens of past pain. You hesitate to apply for the job because the last one rejected you. You avoid love because the last person broke you. You don't speak up because the last time no one listened. And the tragic part is, the world may have changed. The opportunity may be real. The door might be unlocked this time. But you don't even try the handle. This is how the Learned Helplessness Program wires itself into your nervous system. It doesn't shout, it doesn't argue. It simply whispers, "What's the point?" And slowly, that question becomes your reality. You start shrinking. You lower your standards. You numb yourself with distraction. You watch other people chase what you secretly want and convince yourself they're just lucky, just different, just built for it. Meanwhile, the spark inside you dims. But make no mistake, this isn't weakness, it's trauma. The brain is designed to avoid pain. It remembers failure more vividly than success because evolution taught us to fear what hurts. That's survival. But in the modern world, this survival instinct turns into psychological paralysis. The mind builds walls around past wounds and calls it wisdom. But it's not wisdom, it's imprisonment. And the walls don't just keep the pain out, they keep you in. You can see this in childhood. A child ridiculed for speaking up may become silent in adulthood. A student punished for failure may never pursue challenge again. An artist mocked early on might lock away their creativity for life. The original wound was momentary, but the program it created runs for decades. And what's worse, we pass this programming down. Generational trauma teaches us to fear ambition, to distrust joy, to expect loss. Parents who gave up on their dreams often unconsciously teach their children to do the same. Be realistic. Don't get your hopes up. That's not for people like us. And so, the cycle repeats. But here's the truth. Learned helplessness is not destiny. It's not hardwired. It's not permanent. It's a mental program. And like all programs, it can be interrupted, challenged, rewritten. The first step is awareness. Recognize the voice, the one that says, "Why bother?" The one that tells you it's safer not to care, not to try, not to believe. That voice is not truth. It's a scar. The second step is friction. Small acts of resistance. Speaking up when your throat tightens. Applying even when your mind predicts rejection. Trying again, not because you're confident, but because you're curious about what might happen if you did. It will feel uncomfortable, awkward, even terrifying. But that discomfort? That's not failure. That's the program glitching. That's the old wiring short-circuiting as your nervous system encounters something new. Possibility. And with every act of defiance, you teach your brain a new truth. I am not powerless here. Neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to rewire itself, is real. Every time you challenge your helplessness, even in small ways, you change the architecture of your mind. You forge new pathways. You weaken the grip of the old ones. And over time, the whisper of, "What's the point?" becomes a question you laugh at, because you've lived the answer. And that answer is this: you are more capable than your past, more resilient than your pain, more powerful than the voice that says you aren't enough. Because even the dog in the experiment could have leapt the fence, if only it had known the fence was low. You've failed before. You've been hurt. You've been shut down. But you are not broken. You are not done. And you are not helpless. The door may still be locked, but you owe it to yourself to try the handle anyway. The outcome control fixation. You think you're being careful, strategic, responsible. You play out every conversation in your head before it happens. You prepare for all outcomes, rehearse victories, cushion for losses. You script the way it should go, and then the moment arrives, and it doesn't follow the plan. Something slips. Someone reacts differently. The story in your head crumbles against the unpredictability of real life. And instead of being present, you retreat deeper into calculation. This isn't awareness, it's obsession. This is the outcome control fixation. We've been taught that control equals safety, that if we think hard enough, plan deep enough, and anticipate every variable, we can avoid disappointment, that we can outsmart chaos. But life doesn't work that way. Life isn't a chessboard, it's a storm. And the more you try to hold it in place, the more it slips through your fingers. Outcome control sounds noble. It wears the mask of responsibility. You want to make sure no one gets hurt. You want to succeed. You want things to go right. But underneath that desire is a deeper fear, the fear of feeling helpless, the fear of uncertainty, the fear of surrender. And so, you don't just want things to go well. You want to make them go well. You try to control how they see you, how the story unfolds, how the ending lands. You micromanage the timing of a message, the tone of your voice, the pauses in a conversation. You read between lines that don't exist. You analyze silence as if it were an answer. But here's the trap. The more you try to control outcomes, the less you experience life. You stop being with people and start performing for them. You stop hearing what's said and only listen for what confirms your predictions. You lose the present because you're too busy playing God in a future that hasn't arrived. Take Anya. She's about to launch a new business. She's done everything right. Market research, branding, prototypes. But every night she spirals into what-ifs. What if no one buys it? What if people laugh? What if she fails publicly? So she tweaks the website again, changes the name again, rewrites the copy. But she's not building anymore. She's buffering. She's trying to control the ending before the beginning has even lived. And in doing so, she's not creating. She's editing a life she hasn't allowed to happen. Or Dev, who's always rehearsing. If he asks someone out, he imagines every possible rejection. If he gives a presentation, he pictures each critique in advance. He calls it being prepared. But it's not preparation. It's paralysis. He spends so much time trying to avoid failure that he never gives success a chance to breathe. He thinks he's protecting his heart, but he's actually keeping it in a cage. Outcome control isn't strength. It's fear dressed as logic. It's the mind saying, I can't bear to be surprised again. I can't handle another unknown. But the unknown isn't the enemy. It's where life actually lives. Every great love, every unexpected joy, every transformation you never saw coming, they all happened when you weren't in control. And yet, we cling. We cling because we think control gives us power. But real power isn't about outcomes. It's about presence. It's about showing up. Not knowing what will happen, but trusting yourself enough to face it. Because here's the truth you don't want to hear. You can do everything right and still be rejected, still fail, still get hurt. But you can also stumble, improvise, mess up, and still be loved, still succeed, still be more alive than you ever imagined. The fix isn't more planning, it's more trust. Not in the outcome, but in yourself. That no matter how things unfold, you'll find a way, you'll learn, you'll adapt, you'll grow. The path isn't supposed to be clear. It's supposed to be yours. So what happens when you let go? When you stop trying to control how every scene ends? At first, you'll feel naked, exposed, vulnerable, but then free, light, real. Because when you release the need to control, you begin to experience, you begin to hear people again, see colors again, laugh from your gut instead of your strategy. You stop bracing and start breathing. You don't need to know the ending to walk the path. You don't need to script the moment to make it meaningful. You just need to be here, awake, unarmored, open. Control is comforting, but presence is liberating. Let the moment surprise you. Let the outcome be what it is. Because life, the real, raw, beautiful mess of it, is not something you master. It's something you meet. The autopilot habit stack. You wake up, and before your eyes even open, your hand reaches for the phone. Scroll, swipe, dopamine, the same apps, the same stories, the same cycle. You stumble to the bathroom, brush your teeth in the exact same rhythm, same pressure, same thoughts. You're not choosing, you're repeating. Morning to night, you're not living, you're executing a script. This is the autopilot habit stack. A quiet system running beneath your awareness, a chain of behaviors linked together like code. Trigger one, and the rest follow. You're not lazy, you're not broken, you're just looped. Habits don't live in isolation, they live in stacks. You don't just drink coffee, you scroll while drinking. You don't just shower, you rehearse arguments in your head. You don't just eat, you reach for the same plate in the same chair, watching the same show. Over time, your brain bundles these moments into a set. Like saved settings, like macros. One cue unlocks the whole chain, and you don't even know what's happening. Why does this matter? Because identity is built through repetition, and if your habits run you, so will your past. You think you're evolving, but your brain is obsessed with efficiency, not progress. It doesn't care what you want. It cares what you repeat. The goal of your mind is not growth, it's energy conservation. So, if it finds a sequence that works, even if it's toxic, it saves it. That's why change feels impossible. Because to your brain, change is inefficient. It slows things down, forces new wiring, risks emotional cost. So it fights back. It whispers, "We'll start tomorrow." It nudges you toward comfort. It drowns your intention in familiarity. You don't even have to think anymore. You just react. Smell a certain cologne, and suddenly you're back in a memory. Hear a song, and your chest tightens. Sit in a certain chair, and your body slumps like it always does. You think these are moods. They're not. They're triggers, codes, echoes of repetition. Let's say every evening you come home, toss your keys on the same table, kick your shoes to the corner, open the fridge, and grab a drink. That's not a decision, it's a stack. You think the drink is the problem, but really, it's the cue, the muscle memory. Break the loop upstream, and the whole thing dissolves. But most of us only fight the last step, never the chain before it. You wonder why you feel stuck, why your days blur, why you keep setting goals and sliding back. It's because your conscious mind is trying to climb a hill while your unconscious mind is on a treadmill. You can't willpower your way out of a pattern that's been coded for years. Not without awareness, not without disruption. Disruption isn't dramatic, it's subtle. You move the keys, you sit in a different chair. You turn the lights on in a different order. You change the first domino, and the rest don't fall the same. That's where the rewiring begins. The goal isn't to destroy all habits, it's to become aware of them, to watch your life like a scientist, to ask, why do I always do this? What am I avoiding? What is this habit protecting me from? Because here's the hard truth. Every unconscious routine serves a hidden purpose. Sometimes comfort, sometimes distraction, sometimes control. You scroll to numb, you snack to soothe, you complain to connect. You zone out because zoning in means facing something harder. Habits aren't random, they're shields. And to break them, you can't just remove them. You have to replace them. You need a new stack, one that serves your future, not your past. But first, awareness. That's the ignition. You wake up, and before you reach for your phone, you pause. You ask, what's the first thing I want to feel today? You breathe, you slow down, you choose. That moment, just a few seconds long, is the crack in the autopilot code, the moment your script loses its grip. That's where the real you lives, not in the habits, but in the pauses between them. The problem isn't the system is brilliant. The problem is it was built while you were hurting, distracted, overwhelmed, surviving, and now it's running your life. But systems can be rewritten. The human brain is neuroplastic. Every time you interrupt a pattern, your neurons have to renegotiate. They start carving new roads, and the more you walk those new roads, the stronger they get. Until one day you don't reach for the drink, the phone, the excuse. You reach for breath, for stillness, for something better. But it won't feel right at first. It'll feel wrong, boring, empty, like something's missing. Because chaos and distraction have been your rhythm. Stillness will feel like resistance. But that's not proof you're failing. It's proof the habit stack is breaking. The autopilot habit stack isn't evil. It kept you safe, efficient, functional, but now it's keeping you small, disconnected, asleep, and you're waking up. That's what matters. Not perfection, not overnight change, just awareness, choice, disruption. So, the next time you feel stuck, don't ask what's wrong with you. Ask what chain you're running. Ask what cue lit the fuse. Ask what would happen if you just paused. Because the second you choose awareness over autopilot, you don't just break a habit, you reclaim your life. The wound-driven choice engine. You think you made that decision because it was smart, practical, thought out. You tell yourself it was the right path, the safe option, the best available choice. But if you look closer, really look, you'll see something else hiding beneath the logic. A shadow, a memory, a bruise. Because many of the choices you call rational were actually made out of fear. Not of the future, but of the past repeating itself. This is the wound-driven choice engine. It doesn't shout. It doesn't announce itself. It hides behind words like sensible or responsible or realistic. But in reality, it's not logic that's steering your life. It's trauma with a mask on. You didn't choose that relationship because it felt right. You chose it because it felt familiar. You didn't avoid that opportunity because it was wrong. You avoided it because failure once left a scar, and you swore never to feel it again. You didn't walk away from that dream because it was impossible. You walked away because the last time you tried, someone laughed. Or worse, they didn't even notice. And you've been running from that silence ever since. This is how the past shapes the future, by slipping in through the back door, by whispering, let's not go there again, and turning the wheel of your life before you even know it's been touched. Your fears pretend to be your instincts. Your patterns pretend to be your personality. And suddenly the version of you that exists today is just the version who got tired of being hurt. Think about it. How many of your biggest decisions, your career, your relationships, the way you present yourself to the world, were made from freedom, and how many were made to avoid pain? That school you chose. Maybe it wasn't your dream. It was the one that wouldn't disappoint your parents. That partner? Maybe they weren't your soulmate. They just didn't trigger your deepest wounds. That job? Maybe it doesn't light you up. It just feels safe, predictable, numb. But numb isn't neutral. It's a scar with a heartbeat. And scars don't just protect us, they limit us. They reroute our entire path to avoid pain, without ever asking if the pain is still real. The wound-driven engine doesn't care if you're happy. It cares if you're safe. And safety to the brain often just means familiar suffering. So you repeat the same arguments in different relationships. You chase the same validation in different careers. You reject joy that arrives too easily because the last time you trusted ease, it betrayed you. And every time you say, this is just who I am, maybe what you really mean is, this is who I became to survive. But survival isn't the same as living. And the wounds that once saved you, they don't know how to let go. They're still trying to protect you from a danger that might no longer exist. But they speak in choices, in reactions, in exits. They nudge you toward the familiar, even when it's painful. They push you away from the unknown, even when it's full of potential. Because to your nervous system, discomfort is safer than uncertainty. At least with pain, you know the rules. At least with sadness, you know how the story ends. And so, life becomes a loop. Different faces, same endings. Different jobs, same burnout. Different cities, same ache. Until one day, you pause. You trace the thread. You feel the pull of an old story trying to write your next chapter. And for the first time, you ask, is this choice mine, or is it my fear wearing my voice? That's where change begins. Not with a breakthrough, not with a miracle, but with the quiet honesty of self-interrogation. You start to notice that your "I don't trust people" is really "I was betrayed when I was young." That your "I don't need help" is really "I was punished for needing anything." That your "I prefer being alone" is really "I don't want to risk being unseen again." And none of that makes you weak. It makes you human. We all build our futures from broken bricks. But healing means asking, brick by brick, do I still need this wall? Because not every pattern is protection. Not every defense is worth keeping. Sometimes the armor you wear is the reason your life feels so heavy. So, how do you change it? You begin by noticing the disguise, by asking not just, what am I choosing, but what pain am I trying to avoid? And when the answer comes, loneliness, rejection, failure, you don't push it away, you sit with it, you hold it, like an old friend who just wants to be acknowledged. That's how wounds begin to loosen their grip. That's how fear stops running the show. And slowly, a new kind of decision emerges. One made from presence, not protection. One made from desire, not avoidance. One that says, I might get hurt again, but this time, I choose anyway. And that is the moment you take your life back. Because your pain has shaped you, yes. But it doesn't have to shape everything. Your wounds are real, your fears are valid. But your future? That's still unwritten. The insight without action loop. You've read all the books. You know the language. You can describe your wounds in perfect detail. You've had the realizations, the breakthroughs, the aha moments that left you breathless at 2 a.m. And for a while it felt like transformation, like something was shifting. But then, nothing changed. You still repeat the same habits. You still hesitate when it matters. You still sabotage the very things you claim to want. And no matter how much insight you gather, your life stays eerily familiar. This is the insight without action loop. A trap so seductive, it feels like growth, while quietly keeping you stuck. Here's how it works. You seek truth. You dig into your past. You explore your patterns. You analyze your childhood, your attachment style, your limiting beliefs. You talk to coaches, therapists, mentors, and you begin to understand. You finally know why you do what you do. You see it clearly, like watching a film of your own behavior in slow motion. But then, you stop there. You confuse awareness with movement. You think naming the wound is the same as healing it. You believe understanding the wall is the same as walking through it. It's not. Understanding is not transformation, it's just the door. But if you don't step through, the insight becomes a cage, a well-lit, intellectual, emotionally articulate cage. You sit in it, watching your own loops, explaining them in perfect language, but never changing them. And somewhere deep down, you know that the real work isn't just knowing your patterns, it's breaking them. It's having the hard conversation, not just rehearsing it in your head. It's choosing differently when the old reaction is screaming inside you. It's doing the thing, not waiting to feel ready. But action is terrifying, because once you act, you risk failure, you risk judgment, you risk becoming someone new. So instead, you stay in your mind. You analyze, you reflect, you go deeper. You think maybe if you just uncover one more layer, it'll finally click. You'll feel certain, you'll be prepared. But insight without action is just delay in disguise. And the more insights you collect without applying them, the heavier they become. They stop inspiring you. They start burdening you. Because now you know better, but you're still not doing better. That gap becomes shame, and shame becomes the very thing that keeps you paralyzed. It's not lack of knowledge that's holding you back. It's the fear of stepping into the unknown. The moment you stop thinking about healing and actually begin to live as if you're healed. And yes, it's messy. It means stuttering through new boundaries. It means trembling as you say what you really feel. It means being clumsy with honesty, awkward with change, and uncomfortable in new skin. But that's real growth. Not polished, not perfect, but embodied. Because the truth is, your body doesn't care how many books you've read. Your life won't change because you understand your trauma. It will change when you start behaving in ways that contradict what your trauma trained you to do. You can't think your way into a new life. You have to live your way into it. And yes, insight helps. It's the map. It shows you where you've been, where the landmines are buried, which turns you've taken on autopilot. But a map isn't the journey. It's only useful if you walk. So, if you find yourself stuck, despite all your awareness, ask yourself, what am I afraid to do? What action have I postponed in the name of preparation? What emotion am I trying to understand instead of experience? What have I turned into a theory that needs to be a practice? Because there comes a point where more clarity won't help. More journaling won't help. More watching others change their lives while you nod in agreement won't help. Only action will. Messy, uncomfortable, brave action. Even if it scares you. Even if you don't feel ready. Even if you are shaking the whole time. Because the loop ends the moment you move. The moment you stop watching yourself. And become yourself. Not the perfectly healed version. Not the intellectually enlightened version. But the version who chooses, who risks, who lives. And once you taste that, once you see what's on the other side of the cage, you'll never settle for just insight again. You'll want impact. And you'll finally understand that wisdom isn't what you know, it's what you embody. The painful pattern magnet. You keep ending up in the same place. Different faces, different jobs, different cities, but somehow, the same feeling. The same silence after an argument. The same cold distance. The same tightness in your chest. You tell yourself, it's coincidence. Bad luck. Life being unfair. But beneath the surface, something deeper is unfolding. Something terrifyingly precise. Your nervous system, without your permission, is pulling you back to what you once survived. Not because it's good, not because it's safe, but because it's familiar. This is the painful pattern magnet, a hidden force that draws you, again and again, into situations that echo your oldest wounds. It sounds insane at first. Why would anyone seek out pain? Why would someone chase what once broke them? But it's not logic doing the chasing. It's memory. Not the memory in your mind, but the memory in your body. Your nervous system stores emotional experiences. It learns the rhythm of chaos, the tempo of abandonment, the sound of love laced with fear. And once it learns those patterns, it starts looking for them, because they feel like home. This is why people raised in volatility often feel restless and calm, why someone who grew up unseen gravitates toward partners who ignore them, why someone who had to earn love now feels uncomfortable when it's freely given. The pain may be real, but it's predictable, and predictability to the nervous system feels safer than uncertainty, even if that uncertainty is peace. It's a strange betrayal. You escape the cage only to build a new one with the same dimensions. You walk away from the fire only to light a candle in its shape. You swear you'll never go back, and somehow you always do. But it's not just personal, it's biological. The brain is designed to conserve energy. It loves patterns. It automates. It routes your choices through the paths you've walked most often. So, if you've only ever known relationships that hurt, or environments that reject you, your brain starts thinking that's what life is supposed to feel like. And when something different shows up, something kind, gentle, soft, it doesn't feel safe. It feels suspicious, foreign, even boring. So you sabotage it. You test it. You run from it. You recreate the pain because pain, in some backwards way, feels like truth. This is why trauma is so deceptive. It doesn't just break you, it rewires you. It makes you believe that chaos is love, that anxiety is normal, that walking on eggshells is how connection works. You stop looking for what's healthy and start scanning for what's familiar, and your radar is perfect. Too perfect. You find the exact boss who triggers your old shame, the exact friend who disappears when you need them most, the exact lover who wounds you in a way that feels eerily familiar. And a part of you knows. A part of you sees the pattern, but another part, the louder part, says, Maybe this time it'll be different. And you fall in. Again. This is not your fault, it's programming. Early pain imprints deeply, and unless it's interrupted, it becomes a script your nervous system follows without question. But here's the key. The pattern isn't just a trap, it's also a map. Every painful magnet reveals where you still need healing. If you can stop judging yourself for repeating the pattern and start studying it, you can change it. You can trace it to its root. You can learn what your nervous system is trying to resolve. Because make no mistake, you're not drawn to pain because you like suffering. You're drawn to pain because, on some level, your system is still trying to finish the story, to get it right this time, to master the wound, to feel what you never got to feel, safety, resolution, closure. But the wound doesn't heal by repetition. It heals by disruption, by doing something new. That means recognizing the pattern in real time, catching yourself mid-attraction and asking, does this feel familiar because it's healthy, or because it's home to my pain? It means allowing discomfort when someone treats you well and not running from it. It means resisting the urge to chase what you know and sitting with what you've never felt, emotional safety. And it will feel wrong at first. Your body will rebel, your mind will scream, but that's the sign it's working. That's the sign you're stepping out of the loop, because healing isn't about finding the perfect situation. It's about becoming someone who no longer needs the familiar pain to feel real. The painful pattern magnet only pulls you while you're still magnetized to the past. But once you reclaim your nervous system, once you update your inner definition of love, of safety, of self-worth, the pattern loses its grip. And then, for the first time in your life, you don't mistake peace for danger. You don't confuse stillness with boredom. You don't sabotage what's good just to reenact what once felt normal. You stop chasing ghosts. You start choosing yourself. The suppression rebound effect. You think you've buried it. You told yourself it doesn't matter anymore. You said you were over it, that you've moved on. And for a while it seems like you have. You smile in the mirror, you function, you laugh at the right jokes and nod at the right times. But then, somewhere in the quiet, when you're alone or half asleep or triggered by something seemingly insignificant, it slips through. That same emotion, that same memory, that same ache, it didn't die, it waited. This is the suppression rebound effect. We believe suppression is strength, that pushing pain down is how we win, that if we just avoid talking about it or distract ourselves long enough, it will eventually disappear. But the truth is, what we suppress doesn't vanish. It metastasizes. It shifts from conscious awareness into unconscious influence. It leaks through in dreams, body language, unexpected irritability, irrational fear, and mood swings we can't explain. You don't delete pain by ignoring it. You teach it to speak in code. It's like trying to submerge a beach ball underwater. You hold it down, steady at first. But the longer you push, the more pressure builds. And eventually, snap, it bursts to the surface with even more force than it would have if you'd simply let it float. This is your mind. This is your heart. This is your body rehearsing the truth in the background until you're forced to pay attention. Let's take a real-world example. Someone loses someone they love, but they never grieve. They tell themselves to stay strong. They work longer hours, pick up hobbies, smile for photos. On the surface, they're fine. But their dreams, constantly circling images of abandonment, their relationships, strained by overreactions to small things, their health, declining in subtle but growing ways. The pain didn't go away. It simply changed form. What we suppress doesn't die, it disguises, or take anger. A child grows up in a home where anger was dangerous, so they learn to suppress it. As an adult, they avoid conflict at all costs. They're polite, agreeable, even passive. But they're also anxious, depressed. They wake up feeling heavy for no reason. They develop a twitch in their jaw. Their dreams turn violent. Why? Because the anger didn't leave. It went underground. And now it's bleeding out sideways through the body, through the unconscious, through mysterious emotional shifts they can't explain. And that's the cruel beauty of the suppression rebound effect. It doesn't just remind you of the pain, it mirrors it. Your body starts to feel the thing your mind refuses to admit. You feel tightness in the chest, nausea in social settings, sudden tears with no clear source. The body keeps score, and when the mind refuses to listen, the body starts shouting. Suppression isn't peace, it's paused chaos. And when the mind holds something down for too long, the psyche responds with rebellion, nightmares, panic attacks, intrusive thoughts, addiction. These aren't flaws, they're signals. They're the unconscious screaming for integration, not avoidance. Why does this happen? Because your mind is a meaning-making machine. It doesn't forget wounds, it catalogs them, replays them, tries to solve them while you sleep. Suppression tells the brain, this is dangerous. This must not be touched. And the brain obeys by obsessing. The more you say, don't think about it, the more the mind loops around it. This is the white bear problem. The moment you say, don't think of a white bear, that's all you think of. Suppression creates obsession, not consciously, but behind the curtain. And the emotional cost? Massive. Because suppressed pain isolates you. You start to feel disconnected from yourself. You look in the mirror and see a stranger, someone smiling, but hollow. You lose track of your own needs, your own voice. Because to keep something buried, you have to keep yourself buried with it. So, what's the way out? First, acknowledgement. Not intellectual, emotional. Feel it. Not just, I know I was hurt, but I am still carrying that hurt. You cannot heal what you won't name, and naming isn't weakness, it's courage. Second, expression. Let it out, but safely. Journal, cry, scream into a pillow. Talk to someone who won't shame you for feeling too much. Movement helps. So does art. So does breath work. Suppressed emotion is trapped energy. It needs motion to release. Third, compassion. For yourself. You suppressed for a reason. It was a defense, a survival instinct. You weren't wrong to protect yourself. But now, you're safe enough to unpack it, to turn toward it, to heal. And finally, presence. When a feeling rises, don't run. Don't distract. Don't judge. Just observe. Emotions are messengers, not enemies. They pass through when welcomed and fester when denied. Because here's the truth. The pain you've been avoiding is the key to your freedom. The very thing you thought would destroy you is the doorway back to your full self. You are not broken because you feel deeply. You are human, and every feeling has a right to exist. Not all of them need to be acted on, but all of them need to be heard. So stop trying to be okay. Stop pretending silence is strength. Let yourself feel, because feeling is not weakness, it's release. And release is not chaos, it's healing. The rebound only happens when you run. When you stop running, when you stay, breathe, listen, there is no rebound. There is only truth, and beneath truth, peace. The self-sabotage reflex. You get the thing you prayed for, and suddenly, you're restless. An opportunity opens, and you delay your reply. Love shows up, and you pick a fight. The moment things begin to flow, you freeze. Or worse, you sabotage. Not because you're ungrateful. Not because you're broken. But because joy feels unfamiliar, and unfamiliar feels unsafe. This is the self-sabotage reflex, the invisible recoil that happens when you get too close to peace. It's not that you don't want good things, it's that a part of you has been trained to expect the crash. So you beat life to the punch, you ruin it before it can disappear, because at least then, you're in control. This reflex isn't conscious, it's coded, it comes from a nervous system shaped by disappointment. If joy was always followed by pain, if love was unpredictable, if success came with strings attached, then your brain linked safety to survival, not to happiness. And when things get too good, your body rings the alarm. You flinch emotionally, you brace for loss, even if nothing's going wrong. You feel exposed, vulnerable, like something bad must be around the corner. So you pull back, you procrastinate, you ghost. You binge. You pick up old addictions. You make tiny decisions that slowly sabotage the big breakthrough, and you don't even know you're doing it. It just feels like you. But it's not you. It's your trauma disguised as instinct. Think of a child who grows up in chaos, loud voices, walking on eggshells. Good moments always ruined too soon. That child learns not to trust joy. They learn that peace is a setup for pain, so they adapt. They laugh less, hope less, expect less. They learn that disappointment hurts less if you cause it yourself. That way, it's not a surprise. Fast forward to adulthood. And that same pattern plays out in jobs, friendships, relationships. A promotion triggers anxiety, not pride. A healthy partner feels suspicious, not comforting. Praise makes you squirm. Celebration makes you cautious, because your nervous system doesn't register these things as safe. They're not familiar. And familiar equals safety, even if it's toxic. So when joy shows up, you don't bask in it. You analyze it. You poke holes in it. You start looking for reasons it won't last. And if you can't find one, you manufacture one. You convince yourself you're not ready, or that it's fake, or that you don't deserve it. That inner voice, that's not your intuition. That's your wound, trying to protect itself from disappointment. But here's the tragedy. Joy is not the danger. Your reaction to it is, because the more you flinch from happiness, the less space it has to root itself in your life. You become the architect of your own collapse. And then you say, see, I knew it wouldn't last. Not realizing you were the one who pulled the plug. This isn't just emotional, it's physiological. When you're used to cortisol, adrenaline, and hypervigilance, calm feels like withdrawal. Your brain misses the high of chaos. So when things go well, it creates tension. It needs a spike, a drop, a crash, anything to bring you back to what's known, even if it hurts. This is why healing is so uncomfortable. Not because it's wrong, but because it's different. It doesn't match your old rhythm. Peace feels boring. Stability feels like a trap. You crave movement, even if it means moving backward. That's the reflex, the recoil, the twitch in your nervous system when joy lingers too long. So, how do you stop it? First, you name it. You say, this isn't bad luck. This isn't fate. This is the part of me that got trained to destroy what it couldn't control. Awareness is the beginning. Not judgment. Not shame. Just seeing the pattern. Second, you slow it down. You don't need to overhaul your life. You need to pause in the moments where sabotage usually starts. Before you cancel the date. Before you ignore the email. Before you scroll for hours. Just pause. Ask, what am I afraid of losing if I let this joy stay? Third, you sit in the discomfort of having something good without ruining it. At first, it'll feel unbearable. You'll want to run, to shut it down, to take control. But that discomfort, that's the withdrawal. That's the part of you detoxing from fear-based living. That's what growth feels like. It's not always peaceful. Sometimes it's panic in slow motion. But the more you let joy stay, the more your nervous system adapts. It learns that joy can be safe. That peace doesn't have to be the prelude to disaster. That love can last. That success doesn't mean loss. You start to rebuild the emotional muscle of receiving without flinching. Because here's the truth no one tells you. Sometimes the hardest thing is not fighting the darkness. It's allowing the light, letting good things happen, letting people love you, letting moments be calm without needing to shake them up. That's not weakness. That's power. That's healing. You're not here to rehearse loss. You're here to live fully. Even if your voice shakes, even if your heart races, even if your old identity begs you to run, you're not that child anymore. You're not trapped in the same story. You don't have to break what's finally working just to feel safe. So the next time you feel the urge to sabotage something beautiful, pause. Ask yourself, what would happen if I let this stay? What would it mean if I didn't destroy this? What if I could be safe and happy? Because the most radical thing you can do is not pull the plug. It's to stay in the joy, in the unfamiliar, in the light. That's not weakness. That's survival, rewritten. The people-pleasing armor shell. You smile when you don't want to. You nod when you want to scream. You say yes, even when your soul is begging you to say no. And everyone says, you're so kind, so helpful, so easy to be around. But deep down, you know the truth. This isn't kindness. This is survival. This is the armor you built to stay safe, to be liked, to avoid conflict, to not be abandoned. This is people-pleasing, and it's killing you slowly. Because every time you ignore your own needs to meet someone else's, you don't just bend, you fracture. And every time you silence your truth to maintain peace, you don't just disappear, you die a little more inside. Until one day, you look in the mirror and realize you've become a shape, a shell, molded by the desires of others, hollowed out by the need to be loved. And it didn't start here. No one is born a people pleaser. You became this. You adapted. You survived. Maybe you learned early that love had conditions, that approval was earned, not given. That anger made people leave. That being too much got you punished. That being honest got you shamed. So you started shrinking, smiling, nodding, helping, agreeing. You learned to read the room before you read your own feelings. You learned that your safety depended on their comfort. And now, that reflex is still running your life. You say, "I'm fine," when you're breaking. You apologize for things that weren't your fault. You carry guilt like a second skin. You call it being nice. But it's not nice. It's self-erasure dressed in politeness. Here's the painful truth. People-pleasing isn't about being kind. It's about being afraid. Afraid of rejection. Afraid of abandonment. Afraid of being misunderstood. Disliked. Dismissed. So you wear the mask. You perform. You contort yourself into whatever shape they need, just to be accepted, just to belong. But each time you do, you drift further from who you really are. And the worst part, most people won't notice, because they're benefiting from the version of you that makes their lives easier. They like the agreeable you, the convenient you, the you that doesn't push back. But they don't know the real you, the one screaming beneath the surface. And over time, that silence becomes unbearable. The resentment builds, the exhaustion creeps in. You start to lose track of what you actually want, what you actually feel. Because when your life revolves around avoiding disappointment, your own needs stop feeling real, but they are real. Your anger is real, your boundaries are real, your desires are real, and they deserve more than silent endurance. They deserve voice, space, expression. But how do you break the pattern? How do you shed the armor when it's the only thing that ever made you feel safe? You start by telling the truth, not to everyone, but to yourself. You admit that you're tired, that you're scared, that you've spent years making yourself small just to fit inside other people's comfort zones. You stop calling it kindness when it's really fear. You stop calling it generosity when it's really avoidance. You name it for what it is, self-abandonment. And then, you do the hardest thing of all. You start saying no. You say no to the dinner you don't want to attend. You say no to the favor that drains you. You say no to the dynamic that only takes, never gives. And you sit with the guilt. Not because you're wrong, but because your nervous system is detoxing from a lifetime of over-functioning. And in that space, something powerful begins to emerge. The real you, the one with preferences, edges, needs, anger, fire, the one you buried long ago to be liked. And when you meet them, really meet them, it won't feel easy. It'll feel terrifying, because you'll realize just how long they've been locked away. But they're still there, waiting, patient, whole. Because the truth is, your worth was never supposed to be transactional. You were never meant to earn love by disappearing. You don't exist to make others comfortable at the expense of your soul. You were meant to be real, messy, honest, alive. And some people won't like that. Some will pull away. Some will call you selfish, dramatic, difficult. Let them. Because the people who truly see you, really see you, will never ask you to shrink. They'll make space for your no. They'll respect your edges. They'll celebrate your truth. So take off the armor, not all at once, but piece by piece. Let people feel disappointed. Let them feel surprised. Let them adjust. That's not your burden. That's their growth. Your only job is to reclaim your life, your voice, your freedom. Because people-pleasing feels like connection, but it's a cage, and you were never meant to live in a cage. The constant threat scanner. You walk into a room. Everything looks fine. No one's yelling. The lights are soft. People are laughing. But your body doesn't believe it. Your shoulders tighten. Your heart beats faster. You scan the faces, the exits, the silence between words. You analyze tone, posture, micro-expressions, searching for a threat that probably isn't there. This is the constant threat scanner. It's what happens when trauma rewires your brain to expect danger in places where there is none. It's not paranoia. It's not overthinking. It's survival. Automated. At some point in your past, your nervous system learned that safety was a lie. Maybe it was emotional chaos. Maybe it was unpredictable violence. Maybe it was just a deep, repeated feeling that your needs didn't matter. Whatever it was, your mind made a decision. Peace is suspicious. And ever since, your body hasn't truly rested. Even in calm, you're on alert. Even in love, you brace for the fall. Even in success, you scan for what could go wrong. Because stillness doesn't feel like comfort. It feels like a setup, a pause before the impact, a trap. And it's exhausting. But it's familiar. You don't trust ease. You don't fully relax. You never really land in the moment. You stay a step ahead, outthinking pain before it can touch you. But that forward lean, that tension in your muscles, that constant analyzing, it costs something. It costs presence. It costs intimacy. It costs peace. Because when you're scanning for danger, you can't receive safety. You're too busy preparing for what probably isn't coming. And the worst part? Most people don't even know they're doing it. You think you're being smart, careful, responsible. You say things like, I just don't want to get hurt, or I like to be prepared, or I can't afford to let my guard down. And maybe at some point that was true. Maybe hypervigilance saved you. But now, it's running your life. And you wonder why your shoulders hurt, why sleep feels like a fight, why joy slips through your fingers, why love always feels distant, even when it's close. It's because you've trained your brain to chase ghosts of old pain, forever scanning for what went wrong, so you never have to feel it again. But the scan doesn't just protect you from danger, it also blocks you from healing. Because healing only happens in safety. And if your brain never registers safety, it can't begin. It's like trying to heal a wound while still bracing for the next attack. Your system stays on lockdown. Growth becomes impossible. You don't trust calm because calm was always followed by chaos. You don't trust kind people because the nice ones hurt you the worst. You don't trust your own feelings because they've been dismissed, manipulated, or used against you. So instead you trust patterns, familiar pain, repetition, and you call that logic. But it's not logic. It's defense. Deep, old, trauma-wired defense. But what if the danger isn't here anymore? What if the people in the room aren't out to hurt you? What if this version of you, the one who's scanning and predicting and holding it all together, is ready to rest? Here's the truth. Your brain doesn't know the difference between familiar and safe. So it chooses what it knows, even if what it knows is suffering. But you can teach it something new. Slowly, gently, intentionally. The next time you walk into a room and feel the scan begin, pause. Don't fight it. Just notice it. And ask yourself, what am I afraid will happen right now? Then ask again, what's actually happening right now? This moment of curiosity breaks the loop. And with enough breaks, the scanner loses power. You start letting go of unnecessary armor. You breathe deeper. You stop rehearsing comebacks, exit plans, defense mechanisms. You speak without editing. You laugh without checking the room first. You feel joy and let it stay. Not because the world is suddenly safe, but because you are. You are not the child anymore. You are not trapped in the old story. You are not powerless. And the part of you that's still scanning, it just needs to be reminded, we're not back there. We're here now. And here might finally be okay. The origin story filter. You think you're reacting to the moment, but you're not. You're reacting through a lens that was built years ago, before your adult body, before your job, before your relationships. You're living life through your origin story filter, a survival lens crafted in childhood. Every reaction, every fear, every impulse to run, please or fight, it's not just about now, it's about then. You're not overreacting, you're over-remembering, but not with your mind, with your nervous system. A tone of voice, a shift in someone's eyes, a delay in a reply. It hits you harder than it should. Not because of what's happening, but because of what it reminds you of. Your body keeps the score, and your life becomes a replay of a story that was written before you even knew how to read. Maybe you grew up in a home where love had conditions. You had to earn safety by being good, quiet, perfect. So now, when someone is upset with you, it doesn't just feel like conflict. It feels like danger. Your brain whispers, fix it now or lose everything. Not because that's true, but because that was true once. Or maybe you were ignored, your feelings dismissed, your joy too loud. So now, you hesitate to speak up, you shrink. You second-guess every sentence. You call it being low maintenance, but really, it's just fear dressed in humility. A part of you is still that child, hoping to be seen, but scared of taking up too much space. This is the origin story filter. It distorts your present by projecting your past. And you don't even notice it happening. You think you're being rational. You think your reactions make sense. But you're not responding to reality. You're responding to the version of reality that your younger self learned to survive. And here's the brutal truth. That younger self doesn't know you're safe now. Because the brain doesn't update automatically. It doesn't say, hey, you're 30 now. You're not trapped. You can walk away. You're allowed to rest. No. Unless you actively rewire that lens, your subconscious still thinks it's fighting for its life. So, when someone pulls away, you chase. When things go well, you panic. When someone shows love, you scan for betrayal. You live in emotional time travel, a constant loop. And your reactions seem irrational to others, but they are perfectly logical to the part of you still stuck in survival. You're not crazy. You're conditioned. And until you break that filter, you'll keep reliving moments that should have ended years ago. Think about it. She thinks that if she prepares herself for the grief, it won't hurt as much if it happens. She doesn't want the crash. She dreads it. But dread becomes her ritual, a talisman, as if suffering in advance could soften reality. But it doesn't. It just doubles the pain, imagined and real. And here's where it gets darker. The loop feeds itself. The more you worry, the more it feels like a duty. Like if you stop worrying, you're being careless. Like if you let your guard down, something will happen. You think, if I let go of this thought, the universe will punish me. That's not logic. That's emotional survival. That's a brain trying to control the uncontrollable by exhausting itself. But magical thinking doesn't protect you. It only poisons you. It robs you of the moment you're in, the conversation you could have enjoyed, the meal you could have tasted, the night you could have slept, all traded away for a fantasy. That suffering now will spare you later. It's a lie, but a seductive one. So, how do you break it? First, you name it. This is magical thinking. Labeling it disrupts its power. The moment you see it as a pattern, not a prophecy, you begin to break the spell. Second, test it. Ask, has this worry ever changed the outcome? Has guilt ever rewritten reality? The answer is almost always no, and in that no is freedom. Third, sit with powerlessness. This is the hardest part. Letting go of magical thinking means accepting that life is uncertain, that love is fragile, that you are not in control. And while that's terrifying, it's also true. And in truth, there is clarity. There is peace. Because when you stop trying to control what you can't, you free up energy to care for what you can. You can love fully now. You can speak honestly now. You can rest now. Not because fate is guaranteed, but because you are present, and presence is stronger than fear. Finally, compassion. For yourself. You fell into the loop because you cared, because you were afraid, because you wanted so badly to protect the people and future you love. That's not weakness, that's love misdirected. So redirect it, from control to connection. Because here's the truth, thinking of disaster does not prevent it. Feeling guilt does not undo the past. Worry is not love. Fear is not protection. Control is not safety, but awareness is. Surrender is. Living now is. Let go of the loop and live. The origin story filter. You think you're reacting to the moment, but you're not. You're reacting through a lens that was built years ago, before your adult body, before your job, before your relationships. You're living life through your origin story filter, a survival lens crafted in childhood. Every reaction, every fear, every impulse to run, please, or fight, it's not just about now, it's about then. You're not overreacting, you're over-remembering, but not with your mind, with your nervous system. A tone of voice, a shift in someone's eyes, a delay in a reply, it hits you harder than it should. Not because of what's happening, but because of what it reminds you of. Your body keeps the score, and your life becomes a replay of a story that was written before you even knew how to read. Maybe you grew up in a home where love had conditions. You had to earn safety by being good, quiet, perfect. So now, when someone is upset with you, it doesn't just feel like conflict. It feels like danger. Your brain whispers, fix it now or lose everything. Not because that's true, but because that was true once. Or maybe you were ignored, your feelings dismissed, your joy too loud. So now, you hesitate to speak up. You shrink. You second-guess every sentence. You call it being low maintenance. But really, it's just fear dressed in humility. A part of you is still that child, hoping to be seen, but scared of taking up too much space. This is the origin story filter. It distorts your present by projecting your past. And you don't even notice it happening. You think you're being rational. You think your reactions make sense. But you're not responding to reality. You're responding to the version of reality that your younger self learned to survive. And here's the brutal truth. That younger self doesn't know you're safe now, because the brain doesn't update automatically. It doesn't say, hey, you're 30 now, you're not trapped, you can walk away, you're allowed to rest. No. Unless you actively rewire that lens, your subconscious still thinks it's fighting for its life. So, when someone pulls away, you chase. When things go well, you panic. When someone shows love, you scan for betrayal. You live in emotional time travel, a constant loop. And your reactions seem irrational to others, but they're perfectly logical to the part of you still stuck in survival. You're not crazy. You're conditioned. And until you break that filter, you'll keep reliving moments that should have ended years ago. Think about it. Why does one piece of criticism ruin your entire day? Why does silence from someone feel like abandonment? Why do you over-apologize for existing? It's not weakness, it's memory. Not mental memory, emotional memory. Your body remembers what it felt like to be powerless, to be left, to be invisible. And when the present even slightly resembles the past, your nervous system pulls the alarm. But you don't just see danger, you become the old version of yourself. You shrink into it, a 6-year-old in a 30-year-old body. And in that moment, all your adult logic, strength, and self-worth vanish. Not because you failed, but because the origin filter took over. So how do you stop living through that lens? First, you name it. This isn't all about now, this is about then. That sentence can save you. It doesn't erase the emotion, but it puts it in context. You stop blaming yourself for being too much, too sensitive, too reactive. And you start understanding. These reactions are echoes, not facts. Second, you locate the original wound. Not to re-traumatize yourself, but to witness it. To hold space for the younger you who felt alone, scared, or unseen. You don't fix that child. You validate them. You say, of course you felt that way. Of course you built these defenses. You did what you had to do. And third, you update the code. You practice reacting from now, not from then. You remind your nervous system that it's 2025, not 1998. That the person in front of you isn't your father, that the silence isn't abandonment, that your worth isn't on trial, and that you don't have to earn love anymore. You just have to receive it. This work isn't easy. It's not glamorous. But it's sacred, because every time you pause, breathe, and choose a new response, you break a generational loop. You stop passing the filter down. You stop living someone else's story. You write your own. And slowly the lens starts to clear. You begin to see people as they are, not as echoes of your past. You respond with clarity, not panic, with confidence, not performance. And the little you inside starts to trust that you've got this now, that the danger is gone, that the story has changed. You're not here to keep surviving your childhood. You're here to live beyond it. But you can't do that if you keep looking through the same old lens. So, the next time your reaction feels bigger than the moment, pause. Ask yourself, how old do I feel right now? Who am I trying to please? Who am I afraid will leave? And then, respond from the present. Speak from the self you've built, not the one you had to become. That's how the filter begins to dissolve. That's how you reclaim your life. The comparison identity spiral. You open your phone. You scroll. One photo after another. Someone's wedding, someone's promotion, someone's vacation, someone's child doing something beautiful. You blink, and suddenly you're looking at your own life like a cracked mirror. What started as curiosity becomes quiet shame. You feel behind, inadequate, unseen. Like you missed a secret class everyone else attended, one that taught them how to be effortlessly successful, endlessly admired, permanently enough. This is the comparison identity spiral, a slow bleed of self-esteem through 1,000 digital paper cuts. And it's not just a mindset, it's a full-body illusion. Your nervous system absorbs it, your emotions echo it, and your identity starts to rewrite itself in real time, shaped by what you aren't rather than what you are. It begins innocently, a scroll, a glance, a story, but your brain doesn't just observe, it edits. It trims the rough edges of their lives into perfect highlight reels, polished, filtered, framed just right, and then it overlays them against your raw footage, your behind the scenes, your unedited days filled with self-doubt, dirty dishes, and dreams you're still trying to hold together with duct tape and willpower. The spiral accelerates. You start to measure your worth by the metrics of others. Their beauty becomes your ugliness. Their celebration becomes your failure. Their applause becomes the silence inside you. And the algorithm? It's listening. It learns what makes you hesitate, what keeps you watching, what stabs just enough to hold your gaze. So it feeds you more. More weddings, more homes, more wins. Until your self-image is so fractured, you no longer know who you were before the comparisons began. You start adjusting. Quietly. You pose differently. Speak less freely. Shrink your joy so it doesn't look arrogant. Stretch your sadness into jokes so it feels less raw. You become a performance, a mimicry of the people you think you should be. And what's tragic is that none of it was real to begin with. You're chasing illusions born from illusions. Psychologically, this spiral runs deep. The human brain is wired to evaluate its status within a tribe. Thousands of years ago, comparison was survival. Who's stronger? Who's faster? Who's more desirable to partner with? It helped us navigate danger and hierarchy. But now, the tribe is 7 billion people large and projected through screens. You're not just comparing yourself to your neighbor. You're comparing yourself to supermodels, billionaires, digital avatars, and lifestyle influencers, carefully curating a version of themselves that doesn't even exist outside the screen. And what's worse? Your brain doesn't adjust for context. It doesn't say, that photo was filtered, or that person is smiling because they cried yesterday and needed the likes to feel okay. No, your mind says, they're doing better than me, again, and again, and again. Imagine this in real life. Imagine walking into a room where every single person stands up and announces their best moment of the year while you hold a list of everything that went wrong last week. That's what the comparison identity spiral does. It creates a false environment where you're never enough because you're measuring yourself against peaks while living through valleys. You forget your complexity. You forget that you're allowed to be a work in progress, that growth is not linear, that your path, your pain, your timeline is yours, not theirs, not something that fits inside a caption or a square, not something that can be validated by likes or destroyed by someone else's spotlight. And let's talk about the consequences. You start to delay your own dreams. Not because they aren't worthy, but because someone else already did it better. You stop showing up fully in relationships because you think you need to be more polished, more interesting, more successful. You suppress parts of yourself that are still healing, still growing, because they don't look impressive yet. Comparison becomes a cage made of invisible bars. You smile on the outside, but feel hollow inside. You go to sleep asking yourself why you can't seem to catch up. Why your life feels like a draft no one wants to publish. And the cruelest trick of all, everyone else is doing the same thing, comparing themselves to someone else, thinking they're behind too. We've built a culture of mirrors, none of which reflect truth. Only distortion. And inside that distortion, identity begins to rot. You no longer live for your own inner compass. You live in reaction to others. Their success triggers your shame. Their happiness reminds you of your numbness. Their light becomes the proof of your darkness. But here's the truth they'll never post. They are scared too. They are aching too. They are also staring at other profiles, wondering if they're enough. The only way out of the spiral is to shatter the mirror, to reclaim your timeline, to see yourself not as a failed version of someone else's success, but as a full, living, evolving being with scars that are sacred and steps that are slow but honest. The moment you stop watching everyone else's stage and return to your own inner theater, the spiral loosens. Your breath deepens. Your sense of self returns like a forgotten melody. It won't happen overnight, but it starts with awareness, with noticing when the scroll starts to hurt, with pausing when the envy creeps in, with asking, is this real? Is this helpful? Is this mine? Because most of the standards you're trying to meet aren't yours. They were downloaded unconsciously, absorbed like secondhand smoke, shaping the way you breathe without you even noticing. Try this. Every time you feel yourself shrinking in comparison, shift your focus. From them, back to you. What did you survive this year that no one saw? What silent victories did you win without applause? What parts of yourself have grown in quiet, patient defiance of everything that tried to break you? Those are the things worth posting. Not to impress, but to remember. That your identity was never built to be compared. It was built to be expressed. Not measured by others, but measured by your own becoming. The spiral loses power when you stand still and say, I'm not behind. I'm on my path. I'm not failing. I'm unfolding. And suddenly the noise fades. The shame shrinks. The highlight reels become what they are. Moments, not measurements. And your own life becomes visible again. Not perfect, not filtered, but real. And real is more than enough. The ancestral echo code. You flinch, but nothing happened. You shut down, even though no one yelled. Your chest tightens, your breath shortens, your eyes scan the room for danger that isn't there. And you wonder, why am I like this? Why do I react so quickly when nothing's wrong? But what if the answer isn't in your life, but in someone else's? This is the part no one told you, that not all your reactions are yours. Some are inherited. You carry the echoes of what your ancestors couldn't express, the screams they swallowed, the fear they couldn't name, the silence they were forced to hold. You carry patterns that were never chosen, but passed down like family heirlooms. This is the ancestral echo code, and it's written not in language, but in reflex, in breath, in muscle tension, in the subtle ways your body tries to keep you safe from threats long gone. You were not there when your grandmother walked through war, or when your great-grandfather lost his land, his dignity, his voice. You never heard the slurs thrown at your lineage. You never felt the cold floor where a parent once knelt in shame, but your body did. Because trauma doesn't need your permission to survive. Science now confirms what ancient cultures always knew. Pain travels through bloodlines. It lodges in the nervous system. It imprints on behavior. Studies in epigenetics show that emotional wounds leave biological fingerprints, modifying gene expression without changing the DNA sequence. Meaning, you can inherit fear, mistrust, vigilance, rage, not as a story, but as a state. And one day, you're born. You, with your soft hands and open heart, suddenly overwhelmed by a sadness you can't name, triggered by sounds that don't make sense, avoiding conflict like it's death, panicking when touched, apologizing when you speak. You think you're broken, but you're not. You're remembering, not with your mind, but with your body. You're responding to blueprints etched into your system long before you had words, blueprints drawn by survivors, fighters, victims, witnesses, people who endured more than they could express, and who loved you enough to pass on both their dreams and their defense mechanisms. And now, here you are, catching the echo, living inside it. But you don't have to stay there. This is not a curse, it's a calling. Because while pain is passed down, so is the power to break the chain. Your reactions are real, but they're not always current. They're not always yours. And when you realize that, something remarkable begins to happen. You stop blaming yourself. You stop pathologizing your panic. You stop asking, what's wrong with me? And start asking, who was this for? Whose fear am I holding? Whose silence am I repeating? Whose anger did I inherit? And what was it protecting? You begin to track the pattern. You see how your mother shut down in arguments, how your father never cried, how love was withheld as a form of control, how anger meant danger. You see the roots, you see the shape of it. And when you see it, you can name it. And what is named can be understood. What is understood can be felt. What is felt can finally be released. Healing ancestral trauma is not about blame. It's about responsibility. You're not responsible for the pain that began before you, but you are responsible for what you do with it now. Do you pass it on, or do you transform it? You are the hinge point, the turning chapter, the one who says, it ends with me. But don't expect it to feel like a movie moment. Most days, it looks like shaking while you speak your truth, crying in a room where your family always stayed silent, breathing through the panic instead of hiding it, choosing kindness when rage is your instinct, saying, "I love you" first, even when it terrifies you, or simply staying. Because healing is not loud, it's not glamorous, it's choosing new reactions over inherited ones, again and again and again, until your nervous system learns a new rhythm, until the code is rewritten, and one day, you'll realize something. You haven't flinched in days. You don't apologize for existing. You don't tense up when love gets close. You're not repeating the old script. You're writing a new one. And maybe someday someone will look at you and say, "I don't know why, but I feel safe around you." And you'll know why. Because the echo stopped with you. The freeze before failure. You're right at the edge. The moment is here. The opportunity is real. Your heart beats faster. Your breath tightens. Your mind races, and then nothing. You freeze. You stall. You say, "I just need more time. I'm not ready yet. I'll do it tomorrow." But deep down, you know, you didn't pause because you were lazy. You didn't pause because you didn't care. You paused because something inside you whispered that trying and failing would break you more than never trying at all. This is the freeze before failure. It's the quiet, invisible moment where dreams die, not in flames, but in silence, where the hand doesn't reach, the voice doesn't speak, the step doesn't land. Not because you lack talent, not because you lack desire, but because the terror of failure wraps itself around your nervous system and tells you, "Don't move. It's safer here." And the world won't see it. They'll call you lazy, unmotivated, undisciplined. But inside, it's war. A battle between the part of you that wants to rise and the part that believes you'll be destroyed if you do. You see, failure isn't just an outcome to you. It's a threat to identity. It's a portal back to old wounds. The childhood memory of being told you weren't good enough. The classroom silence after you gave the wrong answer. The time you tried, got laughed at, and decided never again. So now, your body remembers. When the stakes are high, when it matters most, your system throws the brakes. Not because it wants to stop you, but because it wants to protect you. It sees action as risk, and risk as danger, and danger as death. Even if it's just sending the email, recording the video, asking for the job, saying "I love you." Because if you do it and fail, you fear it'll confirm every awful thing you already suspect about yourself. That you're not enough. That you were never meant to succeed. That the hope you felt was just a lie. So instead, you freeze. You scroll. You distract. You wait for the right time, hoping it will arrive dressed in confidence. But it never does. Because courage doesn't come first. Action does. You see, your mind wants certainty. Guarantees, a preview of success before the leap. But real growth doesn't work like that. The confidence you're waiting for, it only shows up after you move. It's the reward, not the prerequisite. So, if you're stuck, frozen, know this. You are not broken. You are not lazy. You are not unmotivated. You are scared. And that's okay. But you cannot let fear write your story, because fear will say, "Don't try, you'll get hurt." Courage will say, "Try anyway, you might become." And yes, failure might come, you might fall flat, you might be rejected, you might hear no. But what's worse, failing and learning, or never becoming who you were meant to be? Every person you admire, every creator, leader, speaker, builder, they all froze too. They all hesitated, but they acted anyway. And that one moment of motion rewrote their entire future. So what are you not doing? Because you fear what it might mean if you try and fail. What brilliance are you hiding behind preparation? What love are you starving by staying silent? What life are you postponing just to protect an old wound? You don't have to be fearless. You just have to move. Tiny step, one click, one message, one sentence, one breath. And when your body screams to freeze, breathe slower. Tell it, "I hear you. But we're safe now." And go. Not because you're ready, but because your life depends on it. The past, future split. You're sitting still, but your mind is in motion. Not forward, not backward, both, at once. You're reliving something that already happened. what you should have said, what you wish you didn't do. And in the same breath, you're fast-forwarding, playing out 100 scenarios of what might go wrong tomorrow, next week, next year. You're not here. You're in a loop, not of thought, but of time. This is the past-future split, and it's so subtle you don't even notice. You think you're thinking. You think you're solving something. But really, you're skipping over the only moment that's real. Now. You're trapped in a kind of psychological time travel, oscillating between regret and anticipation. And the body? The body is right here, waiting for you to arrive. We all do it. We revisit conversations like archaeologists, searching for missed clues. We dissect old heartbreaks like scientists, trying to rewrite outcomes. We imagine confrontations, apologies, victories, and then, without pause, we leap into the future. What will they say? What if I fail? What if I win and lose it all? We try to prepare, to predict, to perfect. But in this constant tug of war between yesterday and tomorrow, we lose something priceless: presence. And presence is not just a buzzword, it's reality. It's the only place where life unfolds. But when your mind is stuck in time travel, the present becomes background noise, a silent blur passing beneath your awareness, unlived and unnoticed. Why does this happen? It's survival. The mind wants control, and the past holds data, mistakes to avoid, patterns to decode. The future offers the illusion of safety. If we can just plan it enough, rehearse it enough, maybe we can avoid the unknown. But in trying to control both ends of the timeline, we forget to live in the only point that has any power, this one. Let's take an example. Annika lies awake in bed every night. Her eyes are closed, but her mind is racing. She replays a breakup from 2 years ago, what she missed, how she should have seen it coming. And then she shifts, imagining future love, fearing future betrayal. She's exhausted by her own thoughts, but she can't stop. She says, "My mind won't let me rest." But it's not her mind. It's her unprocessed past and her unrelenting future, fighting for attention. Or Dev. He's successful, productive, always planning the next move. But even during celebrations, his eyes scan the horizon. He's not in the moment. He's already forecasting the next risk. He doesn't enjoy victories. He uses them as fuel to prevent the next imagined failure. The present isn't enough. It's just a stepping stone, and joy becomes a distant planet, always orbiting, never landing. This split isn't just mental, it's physical. Anxiety lives in the future, depression lives in the past, but the body lives in the now. That's why the split creates a kind of dissonance. Your heart beats in one tempo, your mind in another. You feel disjointed, restless, hollow, like something's always missing. And what's missing is you. Because you can't feel love in the past. You can't experience peace in the future. You can only feel anything real in the now. And every time you bypass it, you trade life for theory. But here's the most tragic part. The past you keep revisiting, it's already over. The future you're obsessed with, it doesn't exist yet. You're haunted by echoes and shadows, but the sun, the actual light of your life, is shining on the ground you're not standing on. So what do? First, recognize the split. The moment you find yourself time traveling, pause, ask, where is my body? What am I touching? What is happening right now that I'm not noticing? Second, breathe. Not metaphorically, literally. The breath only exists in the present. When you anchor to your breath, you return to where life is happening. Third, forgive yourself for leaving, for drifting, for trying to solve things you can't change or predict. This isn't weakness, it's human. But awareness is the doorway home. And finally, choose presence, again and again. Because presence isn't a state you achieve, it's a practice you return to. It's not always peaceful, sometimes it's painful. But even pain, when felt fully, is more healing than numbness disguised as reflection. You don't need to fix the past. You need to feel what it left behind. You don't need to control the future. You need to trust your ability to meet it when it comes. Because every moment spent in the split is a moment lost. But every moment reclaimed is a spark of awakening. And if you can gather enough sparks, you build a fire. The fire of now. Where healing happens. Where connection lives. Where you live. Let the past be a teacher. Let the future be a possibility. But let the present be your home. The cinematic self-view. You watch your own life from above, a camera that's always rolling. Every setback becomes a dramatic montage. Every heartbreak feels like a slow-motion scene. Every achievement is imagined with swelling music, applause in the background, eyes on you. You don't just live, you frame, you narrate, you dramatize. And somewhere in all that direction, you lose touch with what's real. This is the cinematic self-view, the internal movie reel that plays as you walk through the world. It sounds poetic, and sometimes it is. But mostly, it traps you. Because when you see your life like a film, you become obsessed with how it looks, how it feels to an imagined audience, not how it actually is. Your emotions get edited, your story becomes performance, and your growth gets paused while you wait for the next perfect scene. You're not present, you're producing. In this lens, sadness isn't just sadness, it becomes tragedy, a fall from grace, a dark chapter. And when joy finally arrives, you can't hold it fully, because a part of you is already thinking, this scene's too bright, something bad is coming. Your mind starts foreshadowing pain like a screenwriter who doesn't believe in happy endings. You start scripting your identity around narrative arcs, not truth. You're not just hurt, you're the misunderstood protagonist. You're not just lonely, you're the lone warrior walking into the storm. You imagine the pain will make sense later, that someone, someday, will see it all and understand. But no one's watching. There's no audience. There's only you, stuck in the loop of emotional storytelling. It's subtle, but powerful. The cinematic self-view keeps you tied to the performance of pain. You stay longer in toxic situations because it would make a better ending. You refuse to let go because the story isn't finished. You over-identify with struggle because it's dramatic, because it feels like transformation. But it's not growth, it's aesthetic suffering. Real growth isn't cinematic. It's clumsy, silent, slow. It doesn't look good in a montage. It's full of awkward pauses, empty rooms, and quiet victories no one claps for. It's you, at 2 a.m., choosing not to send that message. It's you, waking up the next day and doing the work, even when no one's watching. That's not a scene. It's a life. And yet, your mind still drifts. You narrate arguments in your head like dialogue. You picture yourself breaking down dramatically, rain falling, music swelling. You imagine exes regretting everything while staring out a window. You create timelines where you rise, return, become something so undeniable that the world has to stop and notice. It's not just fantasy, it's a coping mechanism. Because in a movie, everything means something. Everything has a payoff, a redemption arc. But real life, it doesn't always give you that. Sometimes there's no climax. Sometimes there's no full circle moment. Sometimes the apology never comes. The person never returns. The big moment never happens. And when you're stuck in the cinematic self-view, you struggle to accept that. You keep waiting for the scene to turn, for someone to yell cut so the story can move forward. And so, you pause your healing. You put yourself on emotional hold. Not because you want to, but because your narrative brain won't allow a mundane resolution. It wants a spectacle. But healing doesn't care about theatrics. It cares about honesty. You're not here to be a main character. You're here to be a human. There's nothing wrong with imagination. Storytelling is survival. It's how we make sense of pain. But when you start believing the story more than the truth, you lose connection to yourself. You become a character in your own life, not a participant. You look for plot points instead of patterns. You chase closure like a final act, instead of creating peace in the middle of an unresolved chapter. The cinematic self thrives on someday. Someday they'll understand. Someday I'll win big. Someday the pain will be worth it, because it'll all make sense. But real peace doesn't come from an ending. It comes from waking up on a random Tuesday and realizing you don't need the story to be dramatic anymore. You don't need to be in pain for it to feel meaningful. You don't need an audience to validate your existence. You just need to be here, in this scene. No slow motion, no background score, just breath, skin, presence. The story will still unfold, but you won't need it to follow a script. You'll let go of the need to be seen and start seeing yourself. Not as a character, but as a person who lived through something hard and didn't need applause to keep going. So the next time you catch yourself imagining your pain as a scene or your progress as a montage, pause. Ask, what's really happening right now? What am I feeling, not narrating? What part of me still needs to be witnessed so badly that I've built an entire theater inside my mind? And then, turn the camera off. Step back into your body. Let life be ordinary. Let healing be quiet. Let yourself exist without editing. Because sometimes the most powerful story is the one you stop trying to tell. The spiritual bypass pattern. You say the right words. I've let it go. It's all love. Everything happens for a reason. You light candles. You meditate. You share quotes about alignment, vibration, forgiveness. But underneath all that light, there's a wound still bleeding in the dark. You've wrapped your pain in positivity, hoping if you speak enough truth, you won't have to feel it. This is the spiritual bypass pattern, a hidden trap disguised as healing, where we use the language of awakening to avoid the rawness of our own humanity. It sounds like growth. It looks like peace. But inside, something is stuck. And the irony is brutal. In trying to evolve, you actually freeze. In trying to rise above, you bury what needed to rise up. Because healing isn't clean. It's not peaceful mantras and white light meditations. It's rage, it's grief. It's mourning the life you thought you'd have. It's screaming in your car when no one's around. It's sitting in silence while your inner child sobs in your chest. And no quote will carry you through that. No affirmation can replace the ache that was never given permission to speak. This isn't just a personal problem. It's a cultural one. We're taught to skip the dark part, to package pain into wisdom as quickly as possible, to spiritualize our trauma instead of metabolizing it. So we leap from betrayal to forgiveness, from heartbreak to I'm grateful for the lesson, from abuse to they were hurting too. And in doing so, we abandon ourselves. We silence the parts of us that needed to scream, grieve, get angry, fall apart. And then we wonder why we still feel heavy, why joy feels fake, why our bodies are tight, our relationships repetitive, our emotions numb. It's because the wound never left. It just went underground. And it's still speaking. Through anxiety, through exhaustion, through that hollow feeling you get even when everything looks fine. Because pain doesn't disappear when you deny it. It just changes shape. It becomes perfectionism, people-pleasing, addiction to productivity, or a life of constant helping, so you never have to face your own mess. Let's be honest. Sometimes we use spirituality as a drug, a numbing agent, a way to escape the unbearable weight of being human. We say things like, just be present, but the present moment holds a lot of pain. We say, you're not your story, but the story is where the wound lives. We say, raise your vibration, but what if the vibration today is grief, and it needs to be felt, not fixed? True healing invites contradiction. It's sitting with the divine while still hating your past. It's honoring the soul while acknowledging the body still trembles. It's understanding forgiveness doesn't mean the hurt didn't happen. It's learning to say, I'm still angry, without guilt. Growth isn't the absence of pain. It's the integration of it. It's not light instead of darkness. It's light that knows the shape of the dark. We need to stop shaming the messy parts of the journey, because those parts are the journey. You don't become whole by denying the pieces that don't glow. You become whole by gathering them, one by one, with trembling hands and saying, you belong too. Even the bitter parts, even the blame, even the days you regress into sadness that makes no sense, especially those days. And no, this isn't a rejection of spirituality. It's a reclamation of it. Real spirituality doesn't ask you to pretend. It doesn't ask you to transcend your humanity. It asks you to embody it, to stay grounded while touching the sacred, to let your heart break open. Because only in the breaking does something deeper emerge. Your wisdom isn't found in the bypass. It's found in the breaking, in the tears, in the terror, in the tremble, the sacred lives where you least want to look. Let me tell you this. If you cried last night and still showed up today, you're healing. If you questioned everything you believe and still sat with yourself, you're growing. If you got angry at the universe and still opened your palms to ask why, you're spiritual. The mess doesn't disqualify you. It qualifies you. Your divinity is not damaged by your rage. Your purpose isn't erased by your sadness. In fact, the more you honor those truths, the more your soul shines through. Stop measuring your healing by how peaceful you look. Start measuring it by how honest you're willing to be. How often you let yourself feel the things you used to run from. How bravely you sit with discomfort until it teaches you something new. That's where transformation lives. Not in the retreat, not in the mantra, but in the mirror at 2 a.m. when your smile has cracked and the truth is leaking through. The spiritual bypass pattern promises escape, but real healing is not an escape. It's a return to the body, to the wound, to the story, to the breath. You don't heal by rising above it. You heal by going through it. And sometimes the light you're looking for isn't in the sky. It's buried in the darkness you've been too afraid to touch. So, next time you feel broken, don't reach for a quote. Reach for your truth. Sit with it. Let it sting. Let it shake your voice. Let it make you feel foolish and furious and raw. That's the sacred work. That's where the soul softens. That's where the bypass ends and real, holy, human healing begins. The guilt reinforcement loop. You feel it the moment you wake up. A weight, a tightness in your chest, that quiet voice in your mind whispering, you should have done better. You could have been more. And before the day even begins, you're already behind, already apologizing to yourself for existing imperfectly. That's guilt. It's not a passing feeling anymore. It's a home, a loop, a system you live inside. And what's worse, you think it makes you good. Because somewhere along the way, you learned a dangerous lie. That guilt is a sign of morality. That punishing yourself is noble. That suffering is proof of virtue. And so, you repeat the cycle, again and again. You feel guilty. You punish yourself. You isolate. You over-apologize. And when that pain builds up, you use it as proof that you're a good person. That you care. That you're doing the emotional labor. But guilt isn't goodness, and pain isn't penance. You can care deeply, without destroying yourself. But if you were taught that love is earned, that worth must be paid for in pain, then guilt becomes your currency. You trade it for temporary peace, for control, for safety. You think, if I punish myself, maybe others won't. If I carry all the blame, maybe I'll stay loved. But you don't become more lovable through self-destruction. You just become more invisible. The guilt reinforcement loop is subtle. It doesn't shout. It seeps in through good intentions. You cancel your needs to make others happy, then feel guilty for wanting anything at all. You make a mistake, then relive it 1,000 times in your head, convinced that self-forgiveness would mean you're letting yourself off too easy. You feel pain, not because you hurt someone, but because you believe you are the hurt. And when someone tells you you're too hard on yourself, you smile like it's a compliment. Because somewhere, deep down, you think that self-punishment keeps you safe, that it's a sign you care, that guilt keeps you human. But it doesn't. It keeps you small. There's a difference between accountability and self-torment. Accountability says, I made a mistake. Shame says, I am a mistake. And guilt, when weaponized against yourself, becomes recycled shame, looped again and again through your nervous system, until you can't tell where the original wound even came from. Sometimes that guilt isn't even yours. Sometimes you're carrying someone else's discomfort, inherited through generations or absorbed from childhood. You were told to behave, to be good, to make others proud. And when you couldn't, or simply didn't want to, you learned to turn inward, to lash yourself emotionally before anyone else could. And so, you became your own judge, your own executioner, smiling in public, dying in private. Because that's what the guilt loop does. It trains you to suffer quietly, to believe that your pain has purpose, that your exhaustion is evidence of kindness, that your inability to forgive yourself makes you more ethical. But it doesn't. It just makes you tired, hollow, haunted. What if guilt isn't always a sign of morality, but a symptom of misalignment? What if that feeling in your chest isn't a moral compass, but a trauma echo? What if your guilt isn't proof of goodness, but proof that you've been carrying a wound for far too long? Real goodness, true integrity, doesn't require pain. It requires awareness, reflection, change, growth. It requires you to feel the guilt, yes, but not to live in it. Not to build a house inside it. Not to let it become your identity. You're allowed to forgive yourself. You're allowed to move on. You're allowed to say, I messed up, and still treat yourself with compassion. Because self-punishment doesn't heal the world. It just multiplies the suffering. You don't have to suffer to prove you care. You don't have to feel bad forever to be a good person. You don't have to spiral into guilt just because it feels familiar. There is no medal for martyrdom. There is no purity in pain. There is only a choice: continue the loop or step out of it. And stepping out doesn't mean you don't care. It means you care enough to transform, to grow instead of punish, to learn instead of linger, to move forward instead of spinning in place. The guilt loop tells you that healing means forgetting, but healing doesn't erase the lesson. It just ends the suffering. So, the next time you feel that guilt rising in your chest, pause. Ask yourself, is this feeling asking me to change something, or am I just repeating an old punishment I've come to expect? And if it's the latter, breathe. Remind yourself, guilt is not your home. Shame is not your worth. Pain is not your proof of love. You're allowed to let go. You're allowed to forgive yourself. You're allowed to be free. Let me know if you want a layered music audio cue guide for this voiceover, or a thematic sequel script, like When Compassion Turns into Self-Destruction. The closure addiction spiral: you keep checking your phone, reading the same old messages, replaying the last conversation in your head, frame by frame, as if somewhere in the cracks, a hidden answer might reveal itself. You wait for a message that never comes, an apology, an explanation, something, anything that will make it make sense. This is the closure addiction spiral. It doesn't start like an addiction. It starts with a wound, a story left open, a person who left without saying why, a moment that ended without a conclusion, and your mind, wired for patterns, resolution, and meaning, can't let go. So it spins. You think, if I just understood what happened, I could move on. If they just told me why, I could heal. If I could just get one more conversation, one more answer, one more chance. But that chance never comes. Or if it does, it's never enough. Because closure, real closure, doesn't come from the outside. It never has. Still, your brain demands it, like a puzzle missing one piece, like a song stuck mid-note. And until that piece is found, your nervous system stays on edge. Your thoughts orbit the unanswered question. Why did they leave? What did I do wrong? Was any of it real? Could I have fixed it? You scroll through their photos. You draft texts you never send. You talk about it with friends, again and again, not because you enjoy the pain, but because your mind is trying to complete the pattern, to feel safe, to put the book back on the shelf with a clean final chapter. But not every story gives you that luxury. Some stories end with silence. Some people walk away not because you failed, but because they couldn't face the mirror. Some conversations never happen because the truth would collapse the lie they're clinging to. Some pain never gets acknowledged, because acknowledging it would mean owning what they did. So they disappear, and you remain, holding the pieces, trying to build closure out of fragments. But here's what no one tells you. You don't need their permission to close your chapter. You don't need their honesty. You don't need their regret. You don't even need to understand. You only need to decide that the lack of answers will no longer define you. Because waiting for closure is just another way of staying stuck, of keeping one foot in the past, hoping it will behave differently. But the past doesn't change. Only you can. The closure addiction spiral tricks you. It tells you, don't move on yet. Healing comes after understanding. But the truth is harder. Sometimes, healing is choosing to move on without understanding. Sometimes the closure is this: they left. They lied. They ghosted. They failed to show up. And that's all the truth you need, because the real addiction isn't to the person. It's to the unfinished story. You feel like letting go without an answer makes you weak. But it's the opposite. It makes you free. Closure isn't a conversation. It's a decision. To stop chasing someone else's truth and begin living your own. To stop asking why they disappeared and start asking why you kept waiting. To stop needing their apology and start giving yourself the compassion they couldn't. You don't owe them another thought. Not because they're evil, not because they don't matter, but because you matter more, and your peace can't depend on someone else's conscience. So, take a breath. Let the question hang, unanswered. Let the ending be messy, unfinished, unresolved, because that's life sometimes. And when you stop needing the story to make sense, that's when you finally do. The emotional armor reflex. You laugh at the wrong moment. Not because something's funny, but because it's easier than saying what you really feel. You crack a sarcastic joke when someone gets too close. You default to logic when someone asks how you're doing. Not facts, not truth. Just clinical words, rehearsed and safe. You've built something over the years, not a mask, not a costume, but armor. Invisible, but heavy. It's kept people out and it's kept you in. This is the emotional armor reflex. And it happens so fast, so automatically, you don't even notice. Someone leans in with care and you step back with irony. Someone says, "I see you," and you respond with a shrug. Someone offers warmth, and your body stiffens like it's under attack. You say you're just not the emotional type, or that you like to keep things light. But that's not the full story. The truth is, the armor wasn't chosen. It was inherited. Forged in moments when feeling deeply became too dangerous. Emotional armor starts early. A parent who didn't listen. A friend who used your secrets as weapons. A betrayal that felt like a rupture in the soul. Pain like that doesn't just pass. It teaches. It whispers rules into your nervous system. Don't show weakness. Don't trust easily. Don't let them in. And so you build, layer by layer. Humor, intellect, distance. And soon, your truest self is buried under a fortress you call personality. But here's the paradox. What protected you once now imprisons you, because the armor doesn't just keep danger out, it keeps intimacy out too. It blocks connection, love, softness, vulnerability, and without those, safety becomes emptiness. You don't get hurt, but you also don't get seen. Take Karan, for example. He's the life of the party. Quick-witted, sarcastic, always making people laugh, but no one knows he cries alone at night. Not because he's weak, but because humor is his gatekeeper. He thinks, if I can keep people laughing, they won't look too closely. They won't see what I don't want to feel. His jokes are not just entertainment, they're defense mechanisms. Or Amrita. She's brilliant, always composed. Speaks in facts, not feelings. In meetings, in relationships, even with herself. She intellectualizes everything. Trauma becomes data. Grief becomes a phase. She doesn't cry, not because she's cold, but because logic keeps her from drowning. She doesn't trust emotion, because when she was young, emotions weren't safe. They weren't heard. They were used against her. So, she built a world where thoughts rule and feelings get filtered. This reflex is not a flaw, it's a response. A signal that somewhere along the line, being open equaled being unsafe. But here's the problem. The body remembers. You might feel calm on the outside, but your jaw clenches when someone lingers too long in silence. Your stomach tightens when someone says, "I care about you." You flinch at love, not because it's bad, but because it feels unfamiliar, threatening. And that's the tragedy. When safety is built on numbness, love feels like risk. The emotional armor reflex is not always dramatic. Sometimes it looks like ghosting, like changing the subject, like pretending you're too busy when you're really just scared of being known. It's in the way you say, "I'm fine," with a smile that doesn't touch your eyes. It's in the way you listen to others without ever sharing your own story. But the cost? Disconnection. Loneliness. A life lived half present, half protected. You're in the room, but you're not in the moment. You're surrounded by people, but no one knows you. Because you've trained yourself to be invisible behind your own armor. So what now? Start by noticing the reflex. When someone gets close and your instinct is to joke, deflect, analyze, pause, ask, what am I protecting? What am I afraid they'll see? That awareness is everything. Because once you see the armor, you realize it's not who you are. It's what you built. Then, choose discomfort. Small steps. Let someone in. Not everyone, just someone safe. Say something vulnerable and resist the urge to backpedal. Let the silence stay silent. Don't fill it with noise. Let your feelings be messy, unsolved, real. You'll feel exposed, maybe even terrified. That's okay. That's how you know it's working. Because growth doesn't feel like victory. It feels like risk, like tremors in the chest, like reaching out with shaking hands. And last, have compassion for the armor. It served you. It kept you alive. It helped you survive things that could have shattered you. But now, it's okay to outgrow it. You're not weak for wanting connection. You're not dramatic for wanting to be seen. You're human. And humans aren't meant to be bulletproof. Because underneath all that sarcasm and stoicism is someone who still wants to be held, still wants to be chosen, still hopes, despite everything, that someone will stay long enough to see the soul behind the shield. And maybe that someone can start with you. The Overresponsibility Program. You feel someone's discomfort before they even say a word. You watch their body language. You hear the shift in their tone. And before they ask for anything, you're already adjusting, softening your voice, choosing safer words, offering help they never requested. It feels like empathy. It looks like kindness. But underneath, it's something else. This is the Overresponsibility Program, a survival code that teaches you to take care of other people's emotions, even if it costs you your own. You rescue, you soothe, you fix. You monitor every room like an emotional thermostat, constantly trying to regulate the temperature, no matter how exhausted you are. You don't just feel guilt when people are upset, you feel responsible, as if their emotional experience is somehow your fault, your burden to carry, your job to resolve. But it's not. It never was. Yet somewhere along the way, your nervous system got the message, if everyone else is okay, I can finally be okay too. So you became the caretaker, the mediator, the strong one, the peacekeeper, and now you don't know how to not be that. Even in silence, you listen for shifts. Even in calm, you wait for the storm. Because the role is ingrained. You anticipate needs before people express them. You offer solutions before they admit there's a problem. You absorb moods like a sponge, and if someone's hurting, you feel selfish for walking away, even when staying is destroying you. This isn't compassion. This is conditioning. Often it starts in childhood. Maybe a parent was volatile, so you learned to manage their reactions. Maybe your feelings weren't met, so you focused on others instead. Maybe love came with pressure, so you confused care with control. And somewhere in that mess, your identity formed around usefulness. Not being, not living, fixing. Now, your worth feels tethered to service. You ask, what do they need? Before you ask, what do I want? You feel seen only when you're solving, loved only when you're giving, safe only when no one's upset. You're not just supporting people, you're disappearing into them. And the tragedy is, no one asked you to. Because while you're sacrificing your peace, others are just living, processing, being human. They're not demanding you save them, but your program can't tell the difference. It interprets any discomfort as failure, any distance as danger, any silence as abandonment. And so, you double down. You say yes when you mean no. You show up when you're falling apart. You apologize for things that were never your fault. Because if someone's unhappy, your nervous system rings the alarm. But here's what the program never tells you. Other people's emotions are not yours to carry. You can hold space without holding the weight. You can witness pain without absorbing it. You can be loving without disappearing. And when you begin to unhook from that false responsibility, something wild happens. You realize how much of your life was spent managing other people's storms while neglecting your own. You realize how many of your decisions were actually reactions, how often you confused control with connection. Because when your identity is built on helping, you fear what happens when you stop. Who will I be if I'm not needed? Will they still love me? Will I still belong? But real love doesn't require sacrifice as proof. Real love doesn't demand that you bleed to be seen. To break the Overresponsibility Program, you don't need to become selfish. You need to become sovereign. You need to recognize the boundary between compassion and control. You need to feel the discomfort of not fixing and realize it won't kill you. You need to let others sit in their own feelings without rushing to rescue them. Because when you fix someone else's feelings, you steal their growth. When you interrupt their discomfort, you interrupt their transformation. You're not helping. You're hijacking. Not maliciously, but habitually. Out of fear, out of programming. And the worst part? The more you rescue, the more invisible you become. People don't see your exhaustion. They see your reliability. They don't ask how you're doing. They assume you're fine. Because you taught them you're always fine. You taught them that your needs come last. That your silence means, I've got this. But you don't. You're tired. You're worn thin. And you don't know how to ask for help without guilt clawing at your throat. Because that part of you still believes, if I stop giving, I'll stop being loved. But listen closely. You were never meant to earn love through effort. You were never meant to abandon yourself just to be accepted. Love is not a transaction. It's not something you win by managing everyone else's pain. So, the next time you feel yourself stepping in, absorbing, fixing, pause. Ask yourself, is this truly mine to carry? Or am I just running the program again? And then, take a step back. Let the moment breathe. Let the discomfort pass. Let yourself exist without performing. You're allowed to be loved in your stillness, in your no, in your boundaries. You're allowed to rest without apologizing, to be cared for without giving something in return. Because the greatest gift you can give the world is not your sacrifice, it's your wholeness. The clean slate fantasy. You close your eyes and picture it. A new city, a new name, a clean apartment untouched by memory. You imagine the silence of a place where no one knows you, where your past doesn't echo in every corner, where the weight you've carried might somehow fall away at the border. You whisper to yourself, if I could just start over, maybe then I'd be okay. This is the clean slate fantasy, a beautiful illusion that someone else could exist in your place. But the truth? You'd still be there. Because your patterns don't need passports. Your pain doesn't need a home address. You can run, but it follows barefoot. There's something seductive about the idea of escape. It offers control, reinvention, a chance to step out of the roles you never asked to play. The caretaker, the disappointment, the invisible one, the failure. You imagine shedding those skins like old clothes, stepping into a blank canvas where the stories written about you can't survive. But here's the paradox. The slate was never dirty because of geography. It was your reflection, not your surroundings. The ache lives inside, and no matter where you go, your nervous system brings the map. You don't move away from patterns by moving zip codes, because patterns aren't things you hold, they're things that hold you. The way you flinch when someone raises their voice, the way you apologize for existing when there's no harm done, the way love feels like walking on eggshells, the way silence makes your skin crawl because it reminds you of neglect. These aren't changed by fresh paint and better lighting. They're changed by something much harder, looking in the mirror and not looking away. Ask yourself, when you imagine that clean slate, what are you really trying to leave behind? Is it your past, or is it the version of you that never got to process it? We often mistake reinvention for healing, but you can't repaint over a cracked wall and expect it to stand. You have to address the fracture. You have to look at the ways you've coped, the choices you've made not from joy, but from fear. The relationships you attracted because chaos felt more familiar than peace. Because peace, if you've never known it, can feel alien, unsafe even. That's why we repeat. That's why even in the clean slate, new job, new lover, new friend group, somehow the same arguments resurface. The same loneliness creeps in. The same restlessness hums beneath your skin. Because you never left. You just carried your blueprint into a new structure. Let's be clear. Wanting a clean slate doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. It's your psyche saying, I need relief. And sometimes changing your environment can help, can give you breathing room. But if you don't bring awareness with you, the change will be cosmetic. The noise will just echo off different walls. The grief will wear new disguises, and the wound will resurface in the most unexpected places. Like in the way you interpret someone's silence, or in the way you flinch at kindness because you've only known it as manipulation. The real work is subtle. It happens in the moments you stay instead of flee, when you sit with your discomfort long enough to hear what it's really trying to say. When you notice that every time someone gets too close, you sabotage the connection. When you catch yourself replaying old arguments in your head, not because you miss the person, but because your nervous system is addicted to unfinished stories. The clean slate you're looking for isn't out there. It's the moment you stop running. The breath you take when you finally turn inward and say, okay, let's look at this. Awareness doesn't erase your past, but it removes its grip. It softens the reflex. It rewrites the code. It turns the trauma into a teacher rather than a tyrant. And with that awareness comes choice, the power to respond differently, to pause when your impulse screams, to speak truth instead of play roles, to grieve instead of distract, to hold yourself in compassion rather than shame. That's the clean slate. Not an escape from who you've been, but a reconciliation with all the versions of you who were just trying to survive. Think of the people you admire, not because they're perfect, but because they're real. The ones who radiate something grounded. They didn't get there by pretending the past never happened. They got there by facing it, by integrating it, by loving themselves not in spite of their scars, but because of what they survived to earn them. You don't need to start over. You need to start within. Because when your inner world transforms, your outer world will reflect it, without needing to be rebuilt from scratch. You don't need a new place to become new. You need to stop believing the old version of you is permanent. This is your real power, not erasure, but evolution. Not escape, but emergence. And when you do that, when you truly begin to meet yourself in the places you used to abandon, you'll realize something extraordinary. The slate was never dirty. It was just unfinished. And now, you get to write the next chapter with eyes open, feet grounded, and truth in your hands.